Hello beautiful people. Welcome to DC Harry. In today's episode, we explore, what if Superman found Harry in cupboard at age 5 and last son of Krypton raised him as brother, making unstoppable duo. Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Cupboard and the Cape. The call came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, routed through the Metropolis emergency dispatch before someone realized the address was in Surrey, England, and transferred it to the local authorities, who logged it as a noise complaint and filed it under low priority because the neighborhood was quiet and the houses were identical and nothing bad ever happened on Privet Drive. Clark heard it at 11:47 and 2 seconds. He was over the Atlantic when the words cut through the background noise of the world, a child crying, thin and exhausted, the kind of crying that has gone on so long it's become something else, something quieter and more frightening than screaming. He tilted in the air, recalibrated, and was over Surrey in 4 minutes at a speed that rattled windows in 3 counties. He landed on the corner of Magnolia Crescent and walked the rest of the way. He'd learned that, over the years, landing on the street where you were going tended to cause problems. People came out of their houses. Someone always had a camera. It was better to arrive quietly, to look like you'd simply been there all along, which was its own kind of deception but a gentler one. Privet Drive was exactly what it looked like from above, a corridor of careful sameness, every hedge trimmed to the same height, every car in its driveway, every window dark. The kind of neighborhood that took pride in its own uneventfulness. Clark walked slowly, his hands in the pockets of the civilian jacket he kept folded at superspeed when he was on patrol, listening. Number 2. A dog dreaming, paws twitching on a kitchen tile. Number 3. A television left on, some late-night program murmuring to an empty room. Number 4. He stopped. The crying had stopped too, replaced by something worse, the deliberate, controlled silence of a child who has learned that making noise makes things worse. Clark stood on the pavement outside Number 4 Privet Drive and listened to a 5-year-old practice being invisible, and something shifted in his chest, slow and tectonic. The house was ordinary in the way that only houses with something to hide manage to be. 2 cars in the drive. Rose bushes along the front path. A doormat that said welcome with a sincerity the house did not extend to the offer. Clark did not knock on the front door. He walked around the side instead, past a gate that squeaked once, through a narrow passage between the house and the fence, and crouched down beside the small grated vent he'd spotted from 30 feet away. Low to the ground. Under the staircase. "Hey," he said, quietly. "I can hear you in there." Silence. "I'm not going to hurt you," Clark said. He sat down on the ground, which he was aware looked ridiculous, a man in a red and blue suit sitting cross-legged on the path beside a Surrey house at midnight, but he did it anyway because he'd learned that too. Being large and standing over something small never helped. "You don't have to talk. I just want you to know I'm here." A very long pause. Then, in a voice like something wrapped in too many layers of careful, a small voice said, "Are you real?" "Yeah," Clark said. "I'm real. You're Superman. That's what they call me." Another pause, shorter this time. "Why are you here?" "I heard you," Clark said simply. "I was passing by and I heard you, and I thought I'd check in. Is that all right?" The silence that followed was different, considering, rather than afraid. "Then, my cupboard is under the stairs." Clark had already known that. He'd looked through the wall the moment he crouched down and seen the space, barely larger than a coat closet, a cot with a broken leg propped up on a stack of old magazines, a single thin blanket, a shelf with some broken toy soldiers on it. He'd seen the child curled on the cot, small enough that it still fit him, dark hair everywhere and a bruise going yellow-green on his left forearm. He'd looked and he'd made himself breathe slowly and he'd chosen not to let the anger do anything yet. "That sounds uncomfortable," Clark said. "It's all right," the boy said, in the tone of someone who has never been given the option of it being anything else. "What's your name?" "Harry." "Harry. Good name." Clark shifted slightly. How old are you, Harry? 5. A pause. And a half. 5 and a half. Right. Clark looked at the vent. Harry, I'd like to talk to the people inside the house. Would that be okay? The silence this time was very quick and very loud. They'll be angry, Harry said. With you? With me. For making noise. They heard me earlier and Uncle Vernon said if I didn't stop the voice cut off with the practiced precision of someone who has learned not to finish that sentence. It's fine. I'm fine. You don't have to. Clark pressed the heel of his hand against the ground to keep himself doing what he wanted to do, which was remove the wall between himself and that cupboard with considerably more force than was architecturally advisable. Okay, he said. Here's what's going to happen, Harry. I'm going to knock on the front door. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to listen very carefully to make sure you're all right. And if you need me, you just say my name and I'll hear you. Does that make sense? A very small sound that might have been yes. Clark stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked back around to the front door. He knocked twice. There was movement inside, heavy footsteps, a mutter, the click of a light, and then the door opened and Vernon Dursley stood there in a dressing gown with the expression of a man who was already preparing to be outraged before he'd identified the source of the outrage. The outrage recollected itself somewhat when it saw who was on the doorstep. Vernon said. You're Superman, Clark said pleasantly. Sorry to knock so late. I was hoping to have a quick word about your nephew. Vernon's face went through several colors. Our nephew is sleeping in a cupboard under your stairs, Clark said, still pleasantly. Which I'm sure you have a reasonable explanation for. The color settled on a deep, unhealthy red. Behind Vernon, at the top of the stairs, a woman in a nightgown appeared, long neck, horsey face, eyes that were currently doing rapid calculations behind their alarm. Petunia Dursley looked at Superman on her doorstep and did not look guilty. She looked strategic, which told Clark everything he needed to know about her. The boy has a perfectly good room, she started. He's in a cupboard, Clark said. I can see him right now. He tapped the side of his head once. I can always see him, from anywhere I choose to look. And what I'm seeing is a 5-year-old with a bruise on his arm, sleeping on a broken cot, who was crying until about 4 minutes ago. He paused. Would you like to revise your answer? Vernon had apparently decided that outrage was still the correct play. Now see here, he said, pulling himself up. What goes on in this house is none of your. He's a child, Clark said, and something shifted in his voice that was not loudness, it was the opposite of loudness, a kind of absolute stillness that was somehow far more serious than shouting. He's 5 years old and he has a bruise on his arm and he's sleeping in a closet. That makes it everyone's business. He's a freak, Petunia said, and the word came out of her with a venom that was clearly habitual, worn smooth by repetition. He's not normal. Unnatural things happen around him. Things break. He needs, Clark said quietly, not to have a bruise on his arm. The silence on the doorstep was the kind that usually preceded something irreversible. Clark looked past Vernon into the hallway. He could see the cupboard door from here, small, latched from the outside, a latch that had been added specifically to keep it closed from within. A child lock. On a cupboard. With a child inside it. He made a decision. It wasn't a slow decision or a careful one. It arrived whole and certain the way the important decisions always did, and once it was there he couldn't imagine having made a different one. I'm going to take Harry with me tonight, Clark said. I'll be in contact with the proper authorities in the morning about the arrangements. You shouldn't expect him back. Petunia made a sound. Vernon began a sentence that started with now just a bloody and Clark looked at him, with the specific quality of attention that Superman could deploy when he wanted to make a point, and the sentence dissolved. Is there anything in that cupboard that belongs to him? Clark asked. Clothes, belongings, anything. Petunia's mouth was a thin line. He has some clothes in a bin bag in the back bedroom. They were Dudley's. I don't see why. I'll get them, Clark said. He moved past Vernon into the house, which Vernon did not stop him from doing, because Vernon was a man who understood the difference between obstacles you could push through and obstacles that would not move regardless of how loudly you pushed. Clark walked down the hallway to the cupboard door, unlatched it, and pulled it open. The light from the hallway fell into the cupboard at a shallow angle and found Harry Potter sitting up on the broken cot with his knees pulled to his chest, an enormous pair of pajamas hanging off his frame, and a pair of green eyes that were very large and very wary and watching Clark with the focused attention of someone who had learned not to trust things that seemed good. Clark crouched down to eye level. Harry stared at him. Under the scrutiny, Clark made himself stay still and easy and not react visibly to the way the boy's collarbone pressed against his skin or the careful distance in his eyes. "Hi," Clark said. "Hi," Harry said. "I'm going to get your things from upstairs. And then we're going to leave. Is that okay?" Harry looked at him for a long time. "Where will we go?" "My place," Clark said. "It's in America. Is that all right?" Harry appeared to consider this with genuine seriousness. "I've never been to America," he said. "Well," Clark said, "there's a first time for everything." Something at the very edges of Harry's mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile. It was the ghost of one, quick and uncertain, like it hadn't had enough practice to come all the way out. But it was there. Clark got the bin bag from the back bedroom, which contained 4 t-shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, a pair of socks with a hole in the heel, and nothing else. He stood in the bedroom doorway for a moment looking at it. Then he picked it up and went back downstairs. Petunia was in the hallway. "The boy has a place here," she said, and the odd thing was that she seemed to half believe it. "He's my sister's son. We took him in." "You put him in a cupboard," Clark said. "He's not," she stopped. Started again. "There are things about him. Things you don't understand." "Then you could have explained them to someone," Clark said, "instead of putting him in a cupboard." He looked at her for a moment, and it was not an unkind look, which somehow seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. "He's 5 years old, Mrs. Dursley. Whatever you're afraid of, he's 5 years old." He went back to the cupboard. Harry had put on his shoes, oversized trainers that didn't fit, and was standing with the thin blanket clutched in both hands. "Ready?" Clark asked. Harry looked at the cupboard behind him. At the shelf with the broken toy soldiers. He reached back and took one, a small plastic figure, missing an arm, and put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Clark. "Ready," he said. They walked out the front door together. Vernon was in the sitting room doorway, large and red-faced and silent. Petunia stood at the bottom of the stairs with her arms crossed. Harry walked past both of them without looking at either, his chin up and his jaw set, and Clark noticed that and filed it away, that this 5-year-old had already learned how to walk past people who didn't want him as though it was simply a thing you did, as if presence itself was something you could do defiantly. The night air outside was cool and the street was quiet. Harry looked up at the sky. It was clear, and the stars were out in the particular way they came out in the countryside, dense and unpolluted. "So," Harry said. "America." "America," Clark confirmed. He held out the bin bag. "Do you want to hold this, or can we fly?" Harry asked. Clark looked at him. "You're not scared?" Harry appeared to give this genuine consideration. "I'm a little scared," he said, with an honesty that was entirely disarming. "But I'd like to try anyway." Clark picked him up. Harry barely weighed anything, he was light the way underfed children are light, which was something Clark did not let himself think about for too long right now, not when they were standing on a street corner in Surrey and the immediate goal was forward motion. He shifted Harry to his left arm, tucked the bin bag against his body, and stepped back. "Hold on," he said. Harry grabbed 2 fistfuls of cape with both hands. His knuckles went white. His jaw was still set. Clark went straight up. Harry made a sound, not a scream, but something close to one, compressed into a single sharp inhale that lasted about 2 seconds, and then the inhale dissolved into something else, something unguarded and completely involuntary, as the lights of Surrey spread out below them like scattered embers and the cold air came up and the stars came down and Harry Potter, 5 years old, holding a broken toy soldier in his pocket and Superman's cape in his fists, looked out at the world from above for the first time and started laughing. It was a bright, helpless, wondering laugh, the kind that has never been used before and doesn't quite know what it's doing. It lasted about 30 seconds and then it shifted into something quieter, a kind of breathless disbelief, Harry looking down at the lights and then up at the stars and then at Clark's profile, as though checking that this was still happening. "Okay," Harry said. "Okay. This is," he stopped. "Tried again. This is brilliant." "Yeah," Clark said, and found that he was smiling despite himself. "It is." They crossed the channel at altitude, where the cold should have been a problem. Clark noticed the way Harry tucked himself against the wind and adjusted, dropping slightly, tucking Harry closer. Harry didn't complain about the cold. Didn't complain about anything. He just watched the ocean pass beneath them in the dark, his eyes enormous and intent, like he was trying to memorize everything before it disappeared. At some point over the mid-Atlantic, he fell asleep. Clark looked down at the child asleep against his shoulder and thought about Krypton, which he didn't do often because when he did it was unproductive, but tonight it arrived unexpectedly, the cold analytical fact of it, an entire world, an entire civilization, gone. And he had been sent away from it as an infant, and had grown up on a farm in Kansas with a man and a woman who had found him in a field and chosen, in an instant, to keep him. He thought about Jonathan Kent, who had never once hesitated. He thought about what that choice had made possible. He looked at Harry. The bin bag of 2 large clothes was tucked under his arm. In Harry's pocket, a toy soldier with a missing arm made a small lump against Clark's side. He flew west, into the dark, toward the lights of Metropolis. The apartment was on the 16th floor of a building on Sullivan Lane that Perry White always said was too nice for a reporter's salary, which Clark had never exactly addressed. It was clean and lived in, with books on every surface and a kitchen that was used and a window that looked out over the city. Clark had lived there for 7 years and it had always felt comfortable. Tonight, opening the door at 2:30 in the morning with a sleeping 5-year-old in his arms, it felt very small. He moved Clark's laptop from the couch and laid Harry down, folding the too large blanket over him and noting, not for the first time, how small he was, how genuinely, alarmingly small, the kind of small that meant deliberate malnourishment rather than natural variation. Then he went to the kitchen and stood at the counter for a while, looking at nothing. The situation was not straightforward. He was not Harry's legal guardian. He had, when you looked at it from a certain angle, taken a child from his home country without anything resembling authorization. The Dursleys were technically Harry's family, and the British child welfare system had, apparently, not intervened in any visible way in 5 years, which meant either the system had never looked or the system had looked and not considered a cupboard and a bruised arm sufficient cause for action. The second option was worse and more likely. Clark had a contact at Child Protective Services in 3 states and a working relationship with the British government that was cordial if somewhat strained by a disagreement about aerial sovereignty from 1994. He could make calls in the morning. He could talk to Diana, who had better international legal resources than he did. He could, a sound from the living room. Soft and involuntary. He went back in. Harry was still asleep but his face had changed, the careful blankness was gone and what was underneath it was a child having a bad dream, brow furrowed, fingers curled into the blanket. Clark sat on the floor beside the couch. "Hey," he said quietly. "It's all right. You're okay." Harry's brow smoothed slightly. "You're somewhere safe," Clark said. "I've got you." He wasn't sure Harry could hear him. He didn't particularly care whether Harry could hear him. He stayed on the floor with his back against the couch until the breathing evened out completely, until the small hands uncurled from the blanket, and he thought about the word brother and where it had come from and why it didn't surprise him. Kal-El had been sent from a dead world to a living one, wrapped in a ship the size of a bathtub, entrusted to the universe by parents who had believed the universe would be kind. Harry Potter had been put in a cupboard. Two children from impossible circumstances, both alone in ways that the people around them couldn't quite measure. Clark did not believe in coincidence at scale. He believed in the decisions you made when the universe handed you something and asked what you were going to do with it. He had an answer. Harry woke at 7:15 to the smell of pancakes. He lay still for a moment, eyes open, and took inventory in the way that he had learned to take inventory: ceiling, not the cupboard ceiling. Couch, not the broken cot. Light from windows, not darkness. Someone in another room. Pancakes. He sat up slowly, holding the blanket, and looked around. The apartment was sunny in the morning in a way that Privet Drive had never been. Books everywhere. A guitar in the corner with a cracked tuning peg. A photograph on the shelf above the television, a man and a woman in front of a farmhouse, both smiling, the woman with her hand on the man's arm. The man looked like Clark without the cape. Harry got up, keeping the blanket around his shoulders because the apartment was cool, and walked to the kitchen doorway. Clark was at the stove in jeans and a plain blue t-shirt, making pancakes with the focused attention of someone who took pancakes seriously. He looked over when Harry appeared. "Morning," Clark said. "How do you feel about blueberries?" Harry stared at him. "What?" "In the pancakes." "I've got blueberries. And I've got plain." Personal preference. Harry had not, in recent memory, been asked about his personal preference regarding breakfast. He thought about it carefully. "Blueberries," he said. "Good call," Clark said. "Sit down wherever." Harry sat at the kitchen table, still in the blanket, and watched Clark cook. This was, he had decided, somewhere between waking and the kitchen doorway, definitely real. It had the wrong texture for a dream. Dreams had a loose quality to them, a kind of slide, and this was solid and specific and smelled like butter. "Where is this?" Harry asked. "Metropolis," Clark said. "New York State. It's a city." He glanced over. "Have you heard of it?" "Superman lives there," Harry said. He paused. "You live there?" "I do," Clark confirmed. He slid a plate of blueberry pancakes onto the table and put a bottle of maple syrup beside it. "Eat. They're better hot." Harry looked at the pancakes. Then he picked up the fork and tried one, and the pancakes were very good, soft and warm and generously blueberried, and he ate about half the plate before he thought to slow down, by which point Clark had sat across from him with his own plate and was watching him with a specific kind of carefully neutral expression that Harry had never seen on an adult face before. It wasn't pity exactly. It was something more active than pity. "So," Clark said, "I want to talk to you about some things. But first I want to ask, how do you feel?" Harry considered the question with the gravity it seemed to deserve. "Okay," he said. "Good. My arm's better." He glanced at the bruise, which was still there, yellow-green and spreading. "I mean, it doesn't hurt as much." "I'll get something for that after breakfast," Clark said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Clark said. "I want to." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Harry, I spoke to some people early this morning." He had been up at 4 making calls, quiet and quick, contacts in the British and American systems. "And I'm going to be taking care of you. For the immediate future. Is that okay?" Harry looked at him over the edge of his juice glass. "Why?" "Because you need somewhere to be," Clark said. "You don't know me," Harry said. "No," Clark agreed. "But I'd like to." Harry put the juice glass down carefully. He had, over 5 years, become very good at identifying people who wanted things from him, adults who were nice until they wanted something, adults who offered things in order to take things. He watched Clark with the same focused attention he'd been watching everything with since he was old enough to understand that attention was a survival tool. Clark did not look like someone who wanted something. He looked like someone who had made a decision and was sitting quietly on the other side of it, waiting. "Okay," Harry said finally. "That's okay." Clark nodded once, as though that had settled something. "Can I ask you something?" Harry said. "Yes." "Why did you hear me? There must be lots of people crying. You can't go to all of them." Clark was quiet for a moment. It was a genuinely good question, and Harry, he was already noticing, was not a child who asked careless questions. "I can't go to all of them," Clark said honestly. "You're right. I have to choose, every day, and I can't get to everyone, and he stopped. "That's hard. But last night I was close by, and I heard you, and I went. That's what happened." Harry seemed to consider whether this answer was satisfying. "But you didn't just help me and leave," he said. "You brought me here." "No," Clark said. "I didn't just help and leave." He picked up his coffee. "Do you know why?" Harry shook his head. "Because some situations are like fires," Clark said. "You put the fire out, everyone goes home. And some situations are like," he thought about it, "like foundations. The whole structure is built wrong. You can't just patch it. You have to start over." He looked at Harry. "You were in a foundation situation." Harry absorbed this. "My aunt and uncle were the wrong foundation," he said. "Their way of thinking about you was," Clark said. "Yes." Another long pause. A morning bird outside the window. The city was waking up below them, traffic building, the particular crescendo of Metropolis at 7:30 that Clark had come to love in the way you love a language you chose to learn. "They called me a freak," Harry said. It came out very flat, like a thing he had said to himself so many times it had lost its edges. "Because strange things happen around me." Clark looked at him carefully. He had noticed things the night before that he hadn't raised yet, a slight warmth in the air around the boy that wasn't body heat, a subtle luminescence when Harry was frightened that wasn't visible spectrum light. Something that his instruments, as it were, didn't have a clean category for. "Strange things like what?" Clark asked. Harry was quiet for a moment. "Things move," he said. "When I'm angry or scared. The teachers at school said I pushed a boy but I didn't touch him, I was angry and he fell down. And once when Uncle Vernon was going to, he stopped. Started again, steadier. I was scared and all the lights went out. All at once." Clark nodded slowly. "Can you tell me more about that?" "The lights?" Harry frowned, trying to find words for something he'd never been asked to describe. It felt like, he pressed his hands flat on the table. "Like something from in here." He touched his sternum. "Going out." Clark was quiet for a moment. He was not a magical being, he had no frame for this in personal terms, but he had met enough of the world's population to know that the categories the world used were not always the real ones. He had met Diana, who used lightning like punctuation. He had met men who moved faster than time and women who could pull the structure of a sentence out of the air and make it solid. The world was not what most people thought it was. "Harry," he said. "I think those things might be part of who you are. Part of something important about you." He paused. "And I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I think the people who told you there was were afraid of what they didn't understand." Harry looked at him for a long time with those large, too serious green eyes. "My aunt said my mum was a freak too," he said. "She said it ran in the family." "Your mum," Clark said carefully. "What do you know about her?" "She died in a car crash," Harry said. "Her and my dad, when I was 1. Uncle Vernon said it was their fault. That they were," he stopped. "Reckless." Clark said nothing for a moment because he needed a moment. The bruise on the arm was one thing. This was another thing, 5 years of deliberate misinformation, of rewriting a dead woman as negligent and a dead man as reckless, feeding it to a child who had no way to check it. For what reason? What possible purpose? Harry, he said. I don't know exactly what happened to your parents. But I'm going to find out. That's something I can promise you. Harry looked at the table. Then at Clark. Something in the too careful expression shifted, not much, not enough to call it trust yet, but something adjacent to it. Okay, he said. The first 3 weeks were logistical. Clark called Diana, who had better access to European records than the American legal system and fewer qualms about accessing them. He called an attorney in Metropolis who had handled unusual custody situations before, unusual by the standards of a city that had, over the past decade, developed a fairly broad definition of unusual. He called the British Embassy twice and was transferred each time to someone who seemed deeply uncertain what to do with the problem and promised to follow up in a way that suggested they would not. He also, on day 5, found an article in a British newspaper archive from November 1981, a brief, 2-paragraph piece about a gas explosion in Godric's Hollow that had killed a young couple named James and Lily Potter and left their infant son as the sole survivor. No investigation findings. No follow-up coverage. The kind of brevity that sometimes indicated a story being managed rather than told. He showed it to Harry on the 6th day, because Harry had asked and because Harry deserved to know what was known. Harry sat at the kitchen table and read it twice and then said, "That doesn't sound like an accident," and Clark had thought, again, that this 5-year-old was going to be something remarkable. "No," Clark said. "It doesn't." "Will you find out?" Harry asked. "Yes," Clark said. "Are you going to tell me when you do?" Clark looked at him. "Everything I know, I'll tell you," he said. "Every time." Harry nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to the book about planets he'd pulled from Clark's shelf an hour earlier and had been reading with unsettling concentration. It was around this time that Clark called his mother. Martha Kent took the news with a silence that lasted about 10 seconds and then said, "Send me a photo," which was so entirely her that Clark laughed for the first time in 10 days. "He's not injured anymore," Clark said. "The bruise healed. He's eating. He eating well. Everything I put in front of him. I think he's making up a deficit." "Of course he is." A pause. "How old did you say?" 5. Clark. Her voice had the specific warmth in it that was reserved for important things, the warmth she'd used when he came home from his first day at the Daily Planet and when he told her about Lois. "You did the right thing." "I know," Clark said. "Does he know that?" Clark glanced down the hallway toward the bedroom where he'd set up a cot with a proper mattress. Harry had accepted the bedroom with the same careful neutrality he accepted most things, as though expecting it to be revoked. "He's working on it," Clark said. "You'll figure it out," Martha said. "You always do." Clark leaned against the kitchen counter and listened to the city outside and thought about his father in the field on the night he'd landed, 17 years old and terrified and absolutely certain about the right thing to do. "Mom," he said. "I think I'm going to keep him." A pause. Then, with absolute warmth and zero surprise, "Well, obviously." The first time Harry did magic on purpose, or the first time he understood that what he was doing was magic, which was different, he was 6 years old and sitting in Clark's living room, and he wanted the television remote, and it was on the other side of the room, and he reached for it in the way you reach for something when you're thinking about something else, and it slid across the coffee table and into his hand. He stared at it. Then he put it down. Then he reached for it again, concentrating, and it jumped 2 inches to the left. He did this 6 more times with increasing focus and decreasing distance, and by the 4th time it was moving reliably across the surface of the table. He got up and knocked on Clark's bedroom door. "I think I can move things," Harry said, when Clark opened the door. Clark looked at him. Then at the remote in his hand. "Show me," he said. Harry put the remote on the hallway floor, walked 10 feet away from it, and looked at it with the focused attention he was already beginning to deploy like a precision instrument. The remote slid toward him. Clark crouched down, watching. His expression was the one Harry had started thinking of as the interesting face, the one Clark wore when something new was happening that he wanted to understand. Again, Clark said. The remote stopped. Slid back. Came forward faster this time, like something responding to an instruction rather than an accident. Does it hurt? Clark asked. No, Harry said. It feels like, he searched for the word. Stretching. Clark nodded. Like a muscle. Yeah. Harry looked at the remote. Like a muscle I forgot I had. Clark stood up. Harry, he said, I want to tell you something. What you can do is called magic. That's not a word I use lightly, and it's not a word I use to mean strange or wrong. I mean it literally. You have the ability to interact with energy in a way most humans can't. He paused. There are other people like you. I don't know all of them, but they exist. And this thing you can do is not bad. It's a tool. Like any tool, it needs practice and attention and respect. Harry considered this. Like your laser eyes, he said. Clark tried not to smile. A little like that, yes. Can I practice? Harry asked. Every day, Clark said. We'll figure it out together. There were things Clark could not give him and knew it. He could not give him the neighborhood kids who didn't quite know what to make of the quiet dark-haired boy who lived with Superman. He could not give him a mother, though Martha was on the phone every Sunday and visited 3 times that first year and took Harry to the Metropolis Natural History Museum and the farmer's market and spent an afternoon showing him how to plant tomatoes in containers on the apartment balcony, and Harry followed her around with the absorbed attention of someone filing away every detail. He could not give him uninterrupted safety. Metropolis was Metropolis, and Clark's life was Clark's life, and there were 3 evacuations from the building in Harry's first 2 years, twice for supervillain-adjacent activities and once for a gas leak that was deeply anticlimactic by comparison. Harry took all 3 with equanimity that Clark suspected was less equanimity than an extremely finely calibrated threat assessment. Is this a thing I should run from or not, and if not, is it interesting? Harry, he was learning, was almost never frightened by things that were actually dangerous, and occasionally frightened by things that other people didn't consider frightening at all, and the things that frightened him in the second category were uniformly social. He could not give him the years that had already been taken. This was the one that showed up at odd moments, late in the evening, when Harry was asleep and the city was loud outside. Clark would sit in the kitchen with something to drink and think about 5 years of insufficient food and bad light and a broken cot and a child teaching himself to cry quietly so the noise wouldn't make things worse, and there was nothing to do with that information except know it and let it shape how he moved forward. What he could give him was there every morning. Pancakes, because Harry had said blueberries and that mattered. Books, because Harry read with the same hunger he ate with and the shelf emptied every few weeks. The roof of the building at night, because Harry loved heights in the specific way that some people love them, not recklessly but reverently, like the altitude itself was something he understood. A year in, Clark started taking him flying properly. Not the long transatlantic night crossing that had started everything, this was deliberate, circular, over Metropolis in the late evenings when the city lights were coming up and the air was clear, Harry on Clark's back with both arms locked around his neck and his face turned into the wind. He started slow, subsonic, low. By the 3rd time he was going faster. By the 7th time, at Harry's very pointed suggestion that he could go faster, you know, I won't fall, delivered with a 7-year-old certainty and a particular lift of the chin that Clark recognized by now as Harry's tell for I have already decided this, Clark opened it up to Mach 1 and watched Harry go completely silent in a way that was clearly not fear but something better than it, something closer to pure experience. Afterward, sitting on the roof of the Daily Planet building while the city hummed below them, Harry said, "Could you go faster than that?" "Yes," Clark said. "How much faster?" "A lot faster." Harry thought about this. "Would I die?" he asked, with complete practical sincerity. "You'd be uncomfortable," Clark said. "Not dead. You're tougher than you look." "I know," Harry said matter-of-factly, and then, I moved a car today. Clark looked at him. What? In the street. It was about to hit someone, and Harry made a small shoving gesture with his hands. It went to the left. The driver thought he'd steered it. Harry, Clark said, and then stopped, because the first 5 responses that came to mind were all variations on you should be careful, and he'd decided a long time ago he wasn't going to be that. How far did it move? He asked instead. About 2 meters, Harry said. It was a big car. Clark nodded slowly. That's a lot of weight for a push that fast. I was scared, Harry said. I think that makes it easier. Adrenaline, Clark said. What's adrenaline? Bring me that library book on human physiology tomorrow, Clark said. The one on the 3rd shelf. Harry swung his legs over the edge of the building, sitting on the parapet with the easy comfort of someone who has spent enough time at altitude that gravity has started to feel like a suggestion rather than a rule. Clark, he said. Yeah. If I keep getting better at it, the magic, do you think I could get as strong as you? Clark looked at him. At the face that had been filling out for 2 years now, the bones less sharp, the wariness in the eyes increasingly replaced by curiosity. At the boy who had climbed into his arms on a street corner in Surrey and held a cape in both fists and laughed at the sky. I think, Clark said, that you might do things I can't do at all. Harry looked at the city lights below them, thinking about this. That'd be all right, he said. I'd still need you to be faster. Clark laughed, and the city spread below them, vast and bright and moving, and somewhere to the north, in a house that had been watched from great distances, an old man with half-moon spectacles was beginning to wonder where a certain boy had gone. Chapter 2, What Brothers Are Made of. The first thing Harry learned about Clark Kent was that he was a terrible liar. Not Superman. Superman could hold a press conference with a straight face and redirect 17 questions about his secret identity without blinking. But Clark Kent, the man who burned toast on Sunday mornings and fell asleep on the couch with books on his face and argued with his editor over the phone in a voice that carried through walls, was constitutionally incapable of small deception. When he told Harry that broccoli was good, his face did a thing. When he said the noise outside was just traffic, his eyes moved left. Harry catalogued these tells the way he catalogued everything, quietly, without announcing it, filing them away. The second thing he learned was that Clark never used the tells for anything important. When Harry asked hard questions, Clark answered them. When Harry needed to know something, Clark told him. When, at age 7, Harry sat across from Clark at the kitchen table and asked why his parents had really died, Clark put down his coffee and said, I've been looking into that. Here's what I know, and here's what I don't know yet. What Clark knew was this: James and Lily Potter had not died in a car crash. They had been killed by a dark wizard named Voldemort, a name that made Clark's mouth do something carefully neutral, the face he wore when he was thinking about something dangerous. Voldemort had gone to Godric's Hollow on the 31st of October, 1981, and had killed 2 people and tried to kill a third, and the third had been Harry, and something had happened in that house that nobody fully understood, because the killing curse, which Clark explained was a magical construct designed for one irreversible purpose, had not worked. It had hit Harry and it had come back, and Voldemort had been destroyed or dispersed or reduced, and nobody was certain which. What Clark didn't know was why it hadn't worked. Or why Harry had been placed with the Dursleys specifically. Or whether Voldemort was truly gone or merely waiting. Harry listened to all of this with his hands flat on the table and his chin level. When Clark finished, Harry said, He's not gone. Clark looked at him carefully. Why do you think that? Because if he was gone, there'd be nothing to be scared of, Harry said. And I get the feeling there are people who are still scared. The interesting face, immediate and full. What makes you say that? Mrs. Henderson in 4B, Harry said. She's a witch. She smells like magic. Not the same way I do but similar, sort of like rain, sort of like something old, and she flinches when she hears the news sometimes. Like she's waiting for something. He paused. I've seen that before. At Privet Drive. My aunt used to do it. Like she knew there was something out there and she was hoping it wouldn't come to her door. Clark was quiet for a moment. He looked at Harry with an expression that was equal parts pride and something that was not quite alarm but was adjacent to it, the look of a person recalibrating the capabilities of someone they'd underestimated. You've been reading people, Clark said. You told me it was a useful skill, Harry said. I said observation was a useful skill. Same thing. Clark rubbed the back of his neck. Mrs. Henderson is a witch, he said. You're certain? Pretty certain, Harry said. I could be wrong. But the smell doesn't lie. This was new, the synesthetic quality of Harry's magical perception, the way it presented information as sensory data that didn't fit standard sensory categories. Clark had been paying attention to it for 2 years, noting it without pushing, letting Harry describe it in his own terms. Smell was Harry's word for it, though he'd clarified more than once that it wasn't really smell, it was more like knowing a smell without smelling it, which Clark had eventually interpreted as a kind of ambient magical resonance that Harry was reading the way Clark read thermal signatures. I'll look into it, Clark said. I already knocked on her door, Harry said. Clark stared at him. When? Last Tuesday. You were at the Planet. Harry was already bracing slightly, which told Clark he knew this was going to get a reaction. I brought her the post she'd missed. She invited me in for tea. Harry. She's very nice, Harry said. Her name is Evelyn and she was at Hogwarts in the 1940s and she can do this thing with her hands where she makes light and it goes wherever she points. He paused. She offered to teach me. The hand thing. Clark put his coffee down. He looked at his 7-year-old sitting across the kitchen table, completely unapologetic, bright-eyed, and entirely aware that he'd done something Clark hadn't authorized. This was also a thing Harry was becoming, not reckless but direct, a child who saw a thing he wanted to understand and moved toward it without excessive consultation, who had apparently decided at some point that asking permission in advance took time that was better spent on information gathering. It was, Clark thought, uncomfortably similar to being Superman. What did you tell her? Clark asked. That I live with you, Harry said. She already knew. She reads the papers. He tilted his head. She didn't seem scared of you. She seemed relieved. Relieved. Like someone found out was in charge who she trusted. Harry considered. She said you should come for tea too. I think she wants to talk to you. Clark went for tea the following Thursday. Evelyn Henderson was 73, small, sharp-eyed, and made an excellent Victoria sponge. She and Clark talked for 2 hours while Harry sat in the corner allegedly reading a book about electrical engineering and actually listening to every word. Evelyn knew about the magical world in England. She knew about Voldemort, said the name without flinching, which she explained was a personal policy. She knew about Harry, though she hadn't connected the boy upstairs to the famous child until Harry had appeared in her doorway with a handful of post and introduced himself. There are people looking for him, she told Clark, with the directness of someone used to saying difficult things to powerful people. The headmaster of Hogwarts, primarily. He's been trying to locate the boy for some time, I'd imagine. Hogwarts, Clark said. A school. The best school. Harry will need to go, eventually, his magic will require instruction that I can't fully provide. She looked at Clark with clear, considering eyes. The question is under whose terms? Clark had come home from that tea with a very specific look on his face, not worried, exactly, but focused, the way he got when something was going to require strategic management rather than immediate action. He'd sat on the couch and stared at the middle distance for about 20 minutes, and Harry had eventually climbed up next to him and sat with his shoulder against Clark's arm, which was something he'd started doing in the second year, not asking for anything, just being proximate, which Clark always responded to by adjusting slightly to make more room. Someone's looking for me, Harry said. It wasn't a question. It seems like it, Clark said. An old man named Dumbledore. He runs the school you'll go to someday. Why is he looking for me? I'm not sure yet. Clark glanced down at him. But I'm going to find out before he finds you. Okay. Okay, Harry said. And then, Clark, if he finds me first, he won't, Clark said simply. Harry nodded, and that was the end of that conversation, but he filed it, Dumbledore, Hogwarts, looking for him, and added it to the archive of things he was still building context around. The summer Harry turned 8, Clark took him to the Fortress of Solitude. He'd been thinking about it for a while. The fortress was not a secret from people Clark trusted. Diana had been there, Bruce had been there under protest and left quickly because Bruce found the aesthetic alienating, Lois had been there twice and declared it breathtaking but also deeply sterile. Clark, you need to put a rug in here. It was not a question of access so much as a question of timing, and the timing arrived on a Saturday morning when Clark woke up to find Harry on the kitchen counter at 6 a.m., cross-legged, eating cereal and reading a book about Kryptonian crystal lattice theory from a paper Clark had left on the table. Where did you get that? Clark asked. It was on the table, Harry said, without looking up. What's a sun engine? Clark made coffee, looked at the paper over Harry's shoulder, and thought, now is good. They left at 8. The fortress was in the Arctic, which was cold in a way that should have been a problem for Harry, but Harry's relationship with temperature had been interesting since the beginning. He ran warm, not in a feverish way but in a fundamental way, and the cold that should have bit at a child's skin seemed to detour around him, deflected by whatever field his magic generated when he wasn't consciously directing it. He stood in the entrance of the fortress with his neck craned back and his eyes very wide, and Clark stood beside him and let him have the moment. The fortress was many things but it was most immediately staggering, crystal architecture scaling upward in angles that suggested mathematics beyond Euclidean geometry, pale and blue-white, lit by refracted Arctic light from above and deep faint pulses of energy from below. It was not built by human hands and it was not built on human principles, and it made that known. This is yours, Harry said. This is mine, Clark confirmed. It's from Krypton. The technology is, yes. Clark moved forward into the main chamber. My father built it. Or, the recording of my father. The memory of him, held in crystal. He paused. It's complicated. You told me about it, Harry said, following him. His voice had the particular quality of focus that meant he was running through everything he remembered. Your father sent you here when you were a baby because Krypton was dying. Yes. Because he loved you. Yes. Harry walked slowly, running his eyes over the crystal formations, the banks of light, the interface panels that glowed with quiet purpose. Do you miss him? He asked. Your father. The real one. Yes, Clark said. I miss the idea of him. The recording isn't, he thought about how to put it. It's not like having him. It's like having a letter from someone who's gone. The words are real but the person isn't there anymore. Harry was quiet for a while, walking further into the fortress. I miss my parents too, he said, conversationally, the way he talked about it when it had been sitting in him long enough to need air. Even though I don't really remember them. He glanced at Clark. Is it weird to miss someone you don't remember? No, Clark said. You miss what they would have been. Yeah, Harry said. Exactly. He stopped in front of a crystal panel and stared at it. Something in the panel responded to his proximity, a faint warmth, a shift in the light, and Harry's hand came up toward it without quite touching. This is warm, he said. The magic in this. Clark looked at him sharply. You can sense that? There's something like magic in all of it, Harry said, still studying the panel. Different kind. Cleaner. More structured. He finally touched it, fingertips flat against the crystal, and the panel lit up in a quiet wave from the point of contact, a response that was far beyond what touching it should have done. Harry pulled his hand back, surprised. Huh, Harry said. Huh, Clark agreed, considerably more forcefully. What followed was 3 hours that Clark would describe in his journal that night as the most scientifically productive afternoon of my recent life and also the most alarming. Harry moved through the fortress with a kind of intuitive ease that shouldn't have been possible, not because he understood Kryptonian technology but because his magic, apparently, resonated with the energy matrix of the fortress in ways that bypassed the need for understanding. Panels lit up when he approached them. A crystal data storage unit that had been dormant for 12 years activated when Harry sat beside it and looked at it with the focused attention he brought to problems. The ambient temperature in the main chamber rose 4 degrees. Harry was not showing off. He was genuinely curious, reaching toward things to see what they'd do, pulling back when something was too warm or too bright, proceeding with the methodical care of someone who had learned from Clark that investigation was different from recklessness. "He's a natural conduit," the recording of Jor-El said, in Kryptonian, when Clark asked. Harry was in another chamber, sitting with a data crystal, patiently seeing if he could read it. The energy he generates is compatible with the base frequency of Kryptonian solar matrix at approximately 43% alignment. It is extraordinary. What does that mean practically? Clark asked. It means the fortress recognizes him, Jor-El said, in the same way it recognized you. Clark stood with this for a moment. Then he went back to where Harry was sitting. The fortress likes you, Clark said. Harry looked up from the crystal. I know, he said. It keeps doing things without me asking. He paused. Is that okay? Yes, Clark said. That's more than okay. Harry turned the data crystal over in his hands. It was lit from within by something amber and warm, pulsing slowly. Clark, he said, what happens when I go to Hogwarts? Clark sat down beside him on the fortress floor, which was cold under his jeans and presumably cold under Harry's as well, though Harry didn't seem to notice. What do you mean? I mean, Harry frowned at the crystal. Will I still come here? Will things change? You'll go to school, Clark said. 9 months of the year, probably. But you'll come back here in the summers. To me, and to this, and to Martha. He paused. Nothing about what we've built changes because you go to school. Harry turned this over. What if I have to live there, he said. At the school. You'll live there during term, Clark said. You'll come home for holidays and summers. What if they say I can't? Harry said. What if this Dumbledore decides, Harry, Clark said. Look at me. Harry looked at him. There is no version of events, Clark said, in which I allow someone to use your education as leverage over where you spend Christmas. All right. If Dumbledore wants to run a school, he runs the school. What he doesn't get to do is run you. Harry held his gaze for a moment. Then something in his shoulders dropped, a very small release, almost imperceptible, the kind that happens when someone has been holding a breath for longer than they realized. Okay, Harry said. Good. When Harry was 9, he set the apartment on fire. Not a large fire. A contained fire. A fire that occupied, at its peak, approximately 3 square feet of kitchen countertop and was out within 8 seconds due to Clark's immediate intervention, but a fire nonetheless, born from a disagreement between Harry and a maths problem that had started with frustration and ended with a small but committed blaze. Clark stood with the fire extinguisher, looked at the charred countertop, and looked at Harry, who was standing with his homework in his hand and an expression that was equal parts embarrassed and defiant. The maths problem, Clark said. The maths problem, Harry confirmed. We've talked about channeling frustration. I know, Harry said. It usually works. He looked at the counter. I was very frustrated. I can see that. Clark put the extinguisher down. He was not angry. He had decided early on that being angry at Harry's magic for being unruly was like being angry at Clark himself for accidentally laser-eyeing something in the early years, which had happened more than once, which Martha still periodically brought up at inappropriate moments. Come here. They sat on the kitchen floor because it was where Clark sat when there was something important to address, a habit Harry had noticed and taken to mean this is serious but not bad, and Clark talked for about 20 minutes about the difference between suppression and redirection, not telling the magic no but telling it somewhere else, a concept Harry had been working with since Evelyn had introduced it and which clearly needed more practice. Harry listened with the specific quality of attention that meant he was not just hearing but actively constructing something, rebuilding his understanding around the new information. He was like that about everything. Learning was not passive for him but architectural, each new piece examined and placed, and Clark loved that about him, this mind that treated the world like a problem to be understood rather than a condition to be survived. Again, Harry said, when Clark finished. The distinction between suppression and redirection. Clark said it again, differently. Harry nodded, and asked 2 questions, and then said, "Can we practice it now? I want to try while I'm still a bit annoyed." Clark looked at him. "You're still annoyed?" "About the maths problem," Harry said. "Yes." "All right," Clark said. "Where do you want to redirect it?" Harry considered. "The balcony," he said. "The tomatoes Martha planted. They're looking a bit droopy." They went to the balcony, and Harry stood in front of the tomato plants with his residual maths frustration and, with the same focused deliberateness he applied to everything, pushed the energy of it outward and downward and into the soil rather than letting it spike upward into heat, and the tomatoes perked up with a speed that was horticultural improbable, and Harry looked at them for a moment and then made a sound that was very close to a laugh. "That worked," he said, surprised. "It worked," Clark confirmed. Harry looked at his hands. Then at the plants. "Can I do that on purpose?" he said. "Not just with redirected frustration. Like, intentionally grow things?" "I don't see why not," Clark said. "It's energy manipulation. The medium is different but the principle, same muscle," Harry said. "Same muscle," Clark agreed. By summer, the balcony had become something that passers-by on Sullivan Lane occasionally stopped to look at, a riot of growing things that had no architectural right to be that vigorous 14 floors above a city street, tomatoes and beans and herbs and one small apple tree in a pot that had no business producing fruit at its age and yet had given them 6 apples by August. Lois Lane, coming over for dinner one evening, stood in the doorway to the balcony and stared at it. "Clark," she said. "Harry did it," Clark said, from the kitchen. Harry was at the table doing homework and looked up. "Hi," he said. He had met Lois 3 times before and had formed opinions about her with characteristic efficiency, opinions that were, as far as Clark could tell, universally positive and also astute. "She asks questions the same way you do," Harry had told Clark after the first meeting, "but she doesn't let people not answer. She just asks it differently until they answer without noticing." Clark had thought about this for several days. "Those are apples," Lois said, pointing at the balcony apple tree. "I know," Harry said. "Do you want one? They're good." Lois came in and sat across from Harry at the table and took the apple he offered and bit into it and looked at him with the assessing expression that was her neutral face, the one that meant she was deciding what to make of someone. "You grew this," she said. "Yeah," Harry said. "How?" "Magic," Harry said, the same way he'd say maths or cooking. Lois looked at Clark. Clark shrugged, which was not helpful. She looked back at Harry. "How long have you been able to do magic?" "Always," Harry said. "But I've only known what it was for 2 years." He turned a page in his homework. "It's not that complicated when you understand it." "It really isn't complicated." Harry glanced up. "You're asking if I'm downplaying it to seem calm," he said. "I'm not. It's like any skill. You practice it and it makes more sense." He paused. "It's also sometimes like setting things on fire when you're annoyed. But I'm working on that." Lois looked at Clark again. "Third shelf," Clark said, "if you want the reading material." She went and got the reading material, and she and Harry spent the rest of the evening talking about it while Clark cooked, and somewhere around 9:30 Harry fell asleep on the couch with his homework half finished, and Lois sat at the table and looked at Clark across the apartment with an expression he couldn't entirely read. "He's remarkable," she said quietly. "He is," Clark said. "He's going to have a complicated life." "He's going to have a full one," Clark said, which was a distinction that mattered to him. Lois turned the apple core in her fingers. "Is he happy?" she asked. Clark looked across the apartment at Harry asleep on the couch, one arm dangling, the homework slipping toward the floor, completely peaceful in the specific way of someone who doesn't spend sleep braced against the dark. "Yeah," Clark said. "He is." The letter came on a Thursday. Harry was 10, not 11, which was when Hogwarts letters were supposed to arrive, a discrepancy Clark had already considered and which had a theory attached to it, which was that magical tracking found Harry because Harry had been practicing magic visibly and consistently for 3 years, and the castle, which was apparently sentient in a general structural way, had noticed. Evelyn confirmed this on the phone the same afternoon. "The school tracks magical ability," she said, "not age. The age convention is standard because most children don't use magic meaningfully before 11. Harry isn't most children." A pause. "Is he?" "No," Clark said. "Send him," Evelyn said firmly. "He needs it. The structured learning, the community. What I've been able to teach him is basics, he needs room to grow that I can't provide." Clark knew she was right. He'd known for 2 years that she was right. He looked at the letter on the table, thick cream envelope, green ink, a wax seal he didn't recognize, and at Harry, who was sitting across from him with his chin on his hand and both eyes on Clark's face. "You want to go," Clark said. "I want to go," Harry said. "Tell me why." "Because there are things I can't figure out on my own," Harry said, "and Evelyn's reached the edge of what she knows, and you've done everything you can, but you can't actually do magic, so there are limits to what you can teach me, and there's a whole world that I'm part of by blood and I want to understand it." He paused. "And I think that whatever's coming, whatever Voldemort was, whatever the prophecy that Evelyn mentioned once when she thought I wasn't listening, I need to be better prepared than I am. And a school is one way to do that." Clark looked at him. 10 years old, clear-eyed, already thinking in terms of preparation and strategy, already treating the thing he didn't know about yet as a variable to account for rather than a danger to avoid. "All right," Clark said. "We go together to get your supplies. And I talked to Dumbledore before you set foot in that castle." "I know," Harry said. "And if I don't like what he tells me, then we renegotiate," Harry said. "I know. We've talked about this. Have we talked enough about it?" Harry smiled, a full one, the one that had gradually replaced the careful ghost of the thing Clark had first seen on a street corner in Surrey. "We've talked about it quite a lot," he said. "Good," Clark said. "Because I'm going to say it one more time." He leaned forward. "You go to school. You learn. You make friends. You do not let anyone use the fact that you're important to them strategically as a reason to put you in bad situations. If something feels wrong, you tell me." "I know," Harry said. "And you take the mirror." "I was going to suggest the mirror," Harry said. Clark had made the two-way mirrors 2 years ago, a modification on a concept that had existed in the magical community for centuries, updated with Kryptonian communication technology and the resonance array, which Evelyn had explained in her capacity as the most technically minded witch Clark had ever met and which Harry had helped calibrate because his magic made the tuning more precise. They looked like ordinary hand mirrors but connected instantaneously across any distance, without the interference that plagued standard magical communication. Harry took the mirror off the table and turned it over in his hands. On its back, where a monogram might go, there was a small S pressed into the silver casing. Harry had done that himself, with focused heat and a nail, which Clark had noticed and never commented on. "One more thing," Clark said. Harry looked up. "Whatever happens there," Clark said, "you don't have to be anyone's prophecy. You hear me? You're allowed to just be you. Harry held the mirror and held Clark's gaze, and something moved across his face that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite doubt. It was something more complicated, something that said, "I hear you and I hope you're right and I'm not sure yet," but also, underneath it, very quiet and very certain, "I know who I am." "You made sure of that?" "I know," Harry said. The trip to Diagon Alley happened on a Tuesday in late July, and Clark wore civilian clothes because Harry had asked him to, which was a reasonable request. "I don't want my first impression to be Superman's kid," Harry had said, and Clark had thought that was both emotionally intelligent and practically sensible. Diagon Alley was, Clark thought, the most extraordinary place he had ever been, which was a significant statement from someone who had visited 17 planets. Not the architecture was charming but not unprecedented. Not the magic. He had been around Harry's magic for 5 years and had visited Evelyn's apartment enough times to have developed a baseline. What was extraordinary was the density of it, the way magic was simply the operating principle of the entire street, woven into every surface and transaction, the casual miracle of it, shopkeepers levitating boxes and children making sparks and owls going about their business with the dignity of beings who had long since concluded that humans were beneath commentary. Harry walked through it with his hands in his pockets and his eyes everywhere, and Clark walked beside him and watched the street and the people on it watch Harry. The watching was immediate and unmistakable. It started in the robe shop, a woman who looked up and went pale, then flushed, then said something to the man beside her behind her hand. It continued in the bookshop, where the proprietor dropped 3 books and apologized 4 times. By the time they reached the wand shop, it was a low steady current in the street, people turning to look, people touching each other's arms and pointing, and it had been doing this for half an hour and Harry had been absorbing it with the detached calm of someone watching weather. "They all know who I am," Harry said. "Apparently," Clark said. "Is it the scar?" "The scar, and probably the word spread from the robe shop," Clark said. "Word travels fast in small communities." Harry turned his face forward. "I don't like it," he said. Not angry, analytical. "It's not me they're looking at. It's what I represent to them." "No," Clark agreed. "It's not you. Not yet. Will it get better? When you give them something real to look at," Clark said, "the symbol becomes less important." Harry considered this. "So I have to be real enough that they stop seeing the symbol." "That's one way to put it." "That's a lot of work," Harry said. "Most worthwhile things are," Clark said. They went into the wand shop. Ollivander was a man who seemed to exist partially in a different time, present and sharp-eyed but with the quality of someone who had been looking at the same thing for so long they had started to see through it to something else. He came out from between the shelves and looked at Harry with an expression that was immediately and entirely different from the street's reverence. This was something closer to professional interest, the specific attention of a craftsman encountering a material he wanted to understand. "Harry Potter," he said. "That's me," Harry said. "I wondered when you'd come." Ollivander circled him once, not theatrically but precisely, the way Clark circled wreckage sites when he was doing structural assessment. "Hold out your wand hand." The process took 45 minutes. Clark sat on the single chair available and watched wand after wand fail, and Harry's patience with each failure was impeccable. He tried them all with genuine attention, not dismissive when they didn't work, not frustrated, simply present with each one and then ready for the next. Ollivander, Clark noticed, was watching Harry's face more than the wand's. The one that worked was holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. When Harry picked it up, the wand did something that made Ollivander go still, a warmth that spread visibly through the shop, a gold light that lasted half a second and was entirely gone, and an expression on Harry's face that was not surprise but recognition, the look of someone finding something they didn't know they'd been looking for. "Curious," Ollivander said. "What is?" Harry asked. "The phoenix who gave that feather," Ollivander said, "gave only one other. They are brothers, in a sense. Your wand and one other." He looked at Harry over his half-moon glasses. "The other wand belongs to the man who gave you that scar." Harry held the wand and looked at Ollivander without any particular alarm. "Does that mean something specific?" he asked. Practically. It means, Ollivander said, that when the time comes, they will not behave predictably toward each other. Noted, Harry said. He paid for the wand, and they left, and on the way down the alley Clark watched Harry turn the wand over in his fingers, feeling it, and the wand turned back against his palm with a warmth that was visible even without Clark's enhanced senses. "Brothers," Harry said. "That's not necessarily a recommendation," Clark said. Harry glanced up at him. "You and I are brothers," he said. "That," Clark said, "is an entirely different situation." Harry smiled. "Obviously." He tucked the wand in his pocket. "Clark, when I get to Hogwarts and meet Dumbledore, what do I do?" "Be yourself," Clark said. "What if being myself worries him?" "Good," Clark said. "Let it." Harry laughed, bright and sudden, and the people around them turned to look at the sound of it, at the dark-haired boy with the lightning scar on his forehead, laughing on the cobblestones of Diagon Alley like someone who had learned a long time ago that joy was something you owned, not something you borrowed. Clark met Dumbledore that evening, at the Leaky Cauldron, by request. Albus Dumbledore was exactly what Clark had expected and precisely what he'd been quietly concerned about, kind, clearly, with the warmth of someone who genuinely cared about people, and underneath it, arranged with the precision of someone who had learned to think several moves ahead of every situation he encountered and had come to find this natural rather than manipulative. He looked at Clark with blue eyes that missed nothing and seemed amused by something only they were privy to, and Clark sat across the small table and did not let the amusement land. "He's well," Dumbledore said, "about Harry." "Not a question." "He's very well," Clark said. "I was concerned, when I found where you'd taken him." "The arrangements his mother made, put him in a cupboard," Clark said. A pause. Dumbledore folded his hands. "The blood protection," he said, "required." "I know about the protection," Clark said. "I've read everything available." The protection required proximity to a blood relative. It did not require the specific conditions of that house. He kept his voice level. "I think you knew that." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in the blue eyes that Clark couldn't entirely read, not guilt, exactly, but something that was aware of itself. "He needs to be prepared," Dumbledore said. "For what's coming. And the path to that preparation is not always, if you're about to tell me," Clark said, "that suffering builds character and that a boy's pain is a strategic resource, I'm going to ask you to stop." He leaned forward. "Harry is going to Hogwarts to learn. He's going to make friends and grow into himself and become genuinely formidable, and that is going to happen because of who he is, not because of what he's been through. Are we clear on that?" Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that was not convinced but was at least considering. "He's remarkable," Dumbledore said finally. "Yes," Clark said. "He is. And I will be watching how your school treats him with the kind of attention I generally reserve for things I'm worried about." He stood. "He's a good kid, Professor. I'd appreciate it if you let him continue to be one." He left, and Dumbledore sat alone at the small table with his hands folded and his tea cooling, and thought, in the complex layered way he thought about everything, that this was not how he had planned it, and that he might need to revise several assumptions. September 1st arrived with the particular quality of endings and beginnings that was unique to first days, the city gold with morning, the platform 9 3/4 accessed through a brick wall that Harry walked through without hesitation while Clark stood back and watched. They stood on the platform among the steam and the families and the owls, and Harry had a trunk and an owl, a snowy owl he'd named Athena, because Harry named things deliberately and Evelyn had called him cleverly stubborn, which he'd taken as a compliment. He had his wand and his books and the mirror, which was packed in the trunk where it would be accessible. Clark put his hand on Harry's shoulder. "You're going to be extraordinary," he said. Harry looked up at him, at the brother who had found him in a cupboard and built him a world. Something moved across his face that was very simple and very complete. "I know," Harry said. "I had a good teacher." He picked up his trunk and walked toward the train without looking back, and Clark stood on the platform with the smoke and the noise all around him, and watched his brother go forward into a world that did not yet understand what it was dealing with. On the train, Harry found a compartment, sat down, and pulled out the mirror. It lit up before he could activate it, Clark's face in it, already grinning. "Made it?" Clark said. "Made it," Harry said. "Good. Now behave." "Define behave," Harry said. "Don't set anything on fire unless it deserves it." "I'll take that under advisement," Harry said, and put the mirror away, and looked out the window as the train pulled out of the station and London gave way to countryside, and somewhere ahead of him, a castle waited. Chapter 3, The Boy Who Flew. The Hogwarts Express smelled like pumpkin pasties and old wood and something underneath both of those things that Harry had come to recognize as ambient magic, the low steady hum of it, like a building that had been dreaming for 1,000 years and hadn't quite woken up. He sat in his compartment for 40 minutes watching the countryside unreal outside the window, and the countryside was beautiful in the specific way that things are beautiful when you're seeing them fresh, and he was content to watch it alone until the compartment door opened and a round-faced boy looked in with an expression of cautious apology. "Sorry, everywhere else is full. Is it all right if I sit down?" Harry said. "I've got plenty of room." The boy sat down with visible relief and a toad in his hands that seemed resigned to its situation. "Neville Longbottom," he said. "I've lost my toad 3 times since King's Cross. His name is Trevor." "Harry Potter," Harry said. Neville stared at him, and Harry watched the recognition arrive, the forehead check, the scar, the double take, and waited while Neville processed it with admirable speed. "Right," Neville said. "Right. Sorry. I knew you'd be starting, I just didn't. You're younger than I expected." "Most people say that," Harry said. "How did you know I was starting?" "My gran gets the profit," Neville said. "There was a piece about Superman's." He stopped. "Sorry. That's probably annoying." "A bit," Harry said, pleasantly. "What position does your gran read first? Front page or society column?" Neville blinked. "How did you know about the society column?" "The Prophet is essentially a society column with news attached," Harry said. "Most of the people who read it start at the back." He leaned forward. "What did the piece say?" "That you'd been found," Neville said. 5 years ago. That you'd been living in America. Some people weren't happy about it." He paused, his grip tightening on Trevor. "My gran said it was good. That you needed someone." He glanced up. Is he nice?" "Superman." Harry thought about Clark burning toast on Sunday mornings and falling asleep on the couch with physics papers on his face and sitting on the kitchen floor the night Harry had set the counter on fire, talking about the difference between suppression and redirection with the patient certainty of someone who had made the same mistakes himself. "He's my brother," Harry said. "Yeah. He's nice." Neville accepted this with the simple sincerity of someone who had not yet learned to complicate good information. They talked for 20 minutes about Trevor and about Neville's grandmother and about herbology, which Neville was passionate about in the unpretentious way that people are passionate about things they simply love, and Harry found him easy to sit with, not flashy or strategic, just real, which was something Harry valued with the specificity of someone who had spent years learning to tell the difference. The compartment door opened again, harder this time, and 3 people entered without asking, a blond boy in front, 2 larger ones behind him, one on each side with the arrangement of people who went places as punctuation. The blond boy looked at Harry with eyes that were already doing the calculus of social hierarchy, sizing up, deciding, arriving at a position before the conversation started. "You're Harry Potter," he said. "You're in my compartment without asking," Harry said, pleasantly. A brief recalibration. "I'm Draco Malfoy." He said it like a door opening onto something expected to impress. "Hi," Harry said. Another recalibration. Draco Malfoy, Harry was already noting, was someone whose social script depended heavily on other people running their lines correctly. When they didn't, he had to improvise, and improvisation was not his natural strength. "I wanted to introduce myself," Draco said, slightly less certainly. We'll be in school together. It's worth knowing the right people from the start. That's true, Harry said. This is Neville Longbottom. He gestured. He knows quite a lot about herbology. Useful person. Draco glanced at Neville with the particular brand of dismissal that required no words. Neville's ears went slightly pink. Harry clocked this and filed it. I meant people who matter, Draco said. People who know things matter, Harry said. That's something my brother taught me. What's your specialty? The question landed in an interesting way. Draco had expected deference or competition, he had not expected a genuine question delivered with complete neutrality, and he didn't quite know what to do with it. Potions, he said, after a moment. My family has always excelled at, good, Harry said. I'm terrible at potions theoretically. Too much intuition, not enough method. I might ask you about it. He turned back to the window with the clean finality of someone ending a conversation, not rudely but completely. Nice to meet you, Draco. Draco stood for a moment in the space of being dismissed by someone he'd expected to impress, and then left, and the two large ones followed him, and the compartment door slid shut. Neville was staring. What? Harry said. He doesn't usually leave, Neville said. He didn't have a reason to stay, Harry said. That's all that was. Neville looked at the door and back at Harry with an expression that was recalibrating something. Are you always like this? He asked, not unappreciatively. Like what? Like, not bothered, Neville said. By any of it. Harry considered the question honestly. Not always, he said. But I had someone teach me early that most of what people use to intimidate you only works if you let them establish the frame. He paused. His words, not mine. I was 7 when he explained it. I didn't fully understand until I was 9. What frame was Malfoy establishing? That I should be grateful he spoke to me, Harry said. If I'd accepted that frame, everything after it would have run on his terms. He shrugged. I just didn't accept the frame. Neville looked at him for a long, considering moment. I wish I could do that, he said. It's a practice, Harry said. Not a talent. The castle was visible from the boats across the lake, rising out of the dark with lit windows that reflected on the water, and Harry sat in the front boat and looked at it with a feeling that was not quite awe but was adjacent to it, something more specific, something that recognized the deep age and accumulated magic of the place the way his ability to sense magic always recognized density and duration. The castle was old in a way that had become substance, its magic layered like geology, hundreds of years of spells and learning and living woven into stone. It knows things, Harry thought, and the castle seemed to breathe against the thought, something settling in the air above the lake. The sorting was a talking hat, which Harry had known about from Evelyn but which was still, in person, stranger than the description had suggested. It sat on a stool at the front of the great hall and sang a song that was better than it had any right to be, given that it was a hat, and Harry stood in the line of first years and let his eyes go around the room, for long tables, hundreds of faces, the staff table at the front where a row of adults watched the new students with varying degrees of attention. He found Dumbledore immediately. The old man was hard to miss, the purple robes, the half-moon glasses, the white beard, but what Harry found him by was the attention. Dumbledore was looking at Harry with an expression that was warm and watchful and very careful, the face of someone who had been waiting for something and was now observing it with professional interest. Harry looked back, steady and unrevealing. Dumbledore's eyes crinkled slightly, as though something had pleased or surprised him. Harry looked away. The other face that snagged his attention was at the far end of the staff table, a man in a purple turban who was watching Harry with an intensity that was different from Dumbledore's watchfulness. Dumbledore's attention was external, a man looking at a situation. This was something else, nervous, layered, with the quality of something hiding inside something else, and the magic around him was wrong in a way Harry couldn't immediately name, like a note played slightly off-key but sustained long enough that you started to doubt your own ear. He was still thinking about this when McGonagall called his name. The hall went quiet in the particular way that spaces go quiet when everyone decides at the same moment to stop doing what they were doing. Harry walked up the center of the room feeling the attention like weather and sat on the stool and the hat came down over his eyes. "Well," said a voice in his ear, interior and amused. "This is unusual." "I imagine so," Harry said, in his head. "A mind like a filing system," the hat said, almost appreciatively. "Everything categorized. Everything accessible. And yet," a pause. "Not cold. This is interesting. Usually the organized ones sacrifice the warmth for the order or vice versa. Is this going to take long?" Harry asked. The hat laughed. It was a strange sound, internal and rubbery. "Ambitious," it said. "Clearly. But the ambition isn't for power, it's for competence. That's Slytherin's vocabulary but not Slytherin's spirit, quite. Loyal, certainly. Brave, certainly. Clever enough for Ravenclaw but you'd be bored there eventually. And here, a longer pause. Here is something I haven't seen in a while. You've already decided what you are. Haven't you?" "Gryffindor," Harry said. "And if I disagreed?" "We'd have a conversation about it," Harry said, "and I'd explain my reasoning, and eventually you'd come around." The hat laughed again, longer this time. "Gryffindor," it announced to the hall, and the Gryffindor table erupted, and Harry took the hat off, and the great hall was looking at him with the particular roar of sound that comes when a room decides to release something it's been holding. He found a seat next to a red-haired boy with freckles and a girl with large front teeth and the kind of hair that suggested it made its own decisions, and both of them made room immediately. "Ron Weasley," the red-haired boy said, slightly dazed. "You were on the train and I didn't even, you were in the next compartment singing something," Harry said. The door was thin. Ron went scarlet. "That was Fred. Not me. I would never." "It sounded like you were both singing," Harry said. "Hermione Granger," said the girl, leaning across Ron with the energy of someone who has been waiting to speak. "I read about you, about your guardian, I mean, and the situation. I thought it was fascinating from a legal standpoint, the jurisdictional questions alone." "Hi," Harry said. "Harry. The legal questions are interesting. Clark had a good solicitor." "Clark," she repeated. "That's what you call him?" "Not, he's my brother," Harry said. "Yeah. Clark." He picked up his fork. "Do you want to talk about the jurisdictional questions over food or after food?" "After food is fine," Hermione said, with the restraint of someone exercising considerable effort. Ron looked between them. "She's been talking about you since Diagon Alley," he told Harry, in what he clearly thought was a whisper. "I was talking about the legal situation," Hermione said, with dignity. "The jurisdictional questions," Harry said, to Hermione, "are actually interesting if you know the background. The British system had technically flagged me as a ward of my aunt and uncle, but Clark's team found an obscure precedent in the international conventions from 1978 that covered extraordinary custodial circumstances." He paused. Extraordinary being the operative word. Hermione's eyes had lit up in the way eyes light up when someone produces exactly the thing they wanted. Ron looked between them with the expression of a person watching a conversation happen in a language he didn't speak. "I think we're going to be friends," Hermione said. "I think so too," Harry said. Defense Against the Dark Arts was the first Tuesday of term. Professor Quirrell came into the classroom in the purple turban and the stutter and the manner of someone very anxious about something they were hoping nobody would notice, and Harry sat at the front and watched him set up the lesson with the careful inattention of someone choosing not to stare. The wrongness was clearer in an enclosed space. Not overwhelming, controlled, deliberately muted, like someone holding their breath. The magical resonance Harry could sense was double-layered in a way that made no anatomical sense, and one of the layers was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. This was not Quirrell's magic. This was something in Quirrell's space, something occupying him the way a second person occupies a room. Harry said nothing about this during the lesson, which was on counterjinxes and was taught with the erratic energy of someone whose attention was partly elsewhere. He took good notes. He answered 2 questions. He asked one about the theoretical limits of counterjinxes, which Quirrell answered poorly and then recovered from with the specific agility of someone who had been briefed but not fully prepared. After class, he found the corridor empty and pulled the mirror from his bag. Clark's face appeared in it within 10 seconds. "There's something wrong with my defense, Professor," Harry said. "Wrong how?" Clark said. "Wrong like," Harry found the right frame for it. "Like 2 signals on the same frequency. 2 magical presences in one space. And the second one is cold in a way that reads like something that should be dead." Clark was quiet for a moment. "Voldemort," he said. "That's what I think," Harry said. "Have you told anyone?" "I'm telling you," Harry said. "Dumbledore knows, I think," Harry said. "Or suspects." He was watching Quirrell at the feast in a very specific way. He paused. "I think this is something Dumbledore wants to manage himself. Which makes me want to understand it faster than he does." "Harry," Clark said, with the tone that meant I hear you and also I'm going to push back on this. "Don't run at it." "I'm not running at it," Harry said. "I'm watching it." A pause. "There's something else. Something in the school, something below us. I could feel it when we came in over the lake. Old magic, something sealed or contained. Connected to whatever Quirrell's guarding. The paper I found last year," Clark said. "The Gringotts vault transfer. Remember? High security vault moved to Hogwarts for safekeeping." "Yes," Harry said. "I think whatever's in that vault is connected to Voldemort's interest in this school." He tucked himself closer to the corridor wall as a group of older students passed. "I think there's a play being made and the castle is the board." "And you're one of the pieces," Clark said. "I intend to be more than a piece," Harry said. "I know you do," Clark said. "That's what worries me. But it was the particular flavor of worried that meant I trust you. I just want to say this out loud. Keep watching. Don't engage alone. Tell me everything." "Everything," Harry confirmed. "And eat something. The mirror makes you look thin." "The mirror is a mirror, Clark." "Eat anyway," Clark said, and his face disappeared. The troll happened on Halloween, and it happened because Harry already knew it was happening before it happened, which made it considerably different from how it would otherwise have gone. He'd been watching Quirrell for 6 weeks by then. Not obviously, not the staring scrutiny of someone conducting surveillance but the ambient attention of someone who had learned from Clark that the most informative observations were the ones the subject didn't know were happening. Quirrell had a routine, and that routine had a gap in it on Tuesday and Thursday evenings after 7, a period where Quirrell disappeared from his regular patterns and returned with the specific composure of someone who had just done something effortful. On Halloween evening, the gap in Quirrell's pattern coincided with the feast, which meant the corridors were empty, which meant Harry was watching from a junction of the 3rd-floor corridor with Hermione and Ron and a lantern charm Hermione had conjured when the smell hit him, that specific cold wrongness from Quirrell's classroom, moving through the building like a weather front. "There's something in the castle," Harry said. Ron looked at him. "What, apart from us?" "Something that shouldn't be here," Harry said. He turned. "2nd-floor bathroom, I think. East corridor." "How do you know?" Hermione started. "The magic pulls toward it," Harry said, already moving. "Come on." They found the mountain troll in the girls' bathroom with its club and its general indifference to the architectural integrity of the space, and Hermione, who had not yet heard about the troll and had come up here 10 minutes earlier after an unfortunate comment from Ron in Charms, was backed into the far wall between the sinks with her wand out and her jaw tight and a very determined expression that wasn't hiding much. The troll swung its club. Harry was already moving. He didn't think about it in the way that deliberate decisions are thought about, it happened with the quick instinctive geometry of someone who had spent years learning that the gap between intention and action should be as small as possible. He crossed the bathroom in 4 fast strides and came up between Hermione and the club's arc, put both hands up, and the magic came out of him the way it always came when he was moving fast and needed it, not the careful directed push of practice but the broader, warmer, more emphatic kind, the kind Clark had once described as not a tool but a reflex, and the club stopped. Not slowly. Not with visible effort. It stopped the way things stop when they encounter something that does not intend to move. The troll looked at its club, which it was still holding, and at the boy whose hands were raised between it and the girl behind him, and registered confusion in the way trolls registered things, slowly, primarily as a problem with the expected sequence of events. Harry looked at the troll with the focused assessment he brought to problems. "Here's the thing," he said to it, conversationally. "You can try again, and I'll stop that too, and we can do this for however long you like. Or," he stepped forward once. "You can leave." The troll took a step back. It was not used to things stepping toward it. Things generally stepped away from things that were 12 feet tall and carrying a club the size of a small tree. The recalculation this required was visible on its face in the specific way that troll confusion is visible, which is as an overall increase in blankness. "Leave," Harry said, and this time it was not a suggestion but a fact presented about the future, and the magic in the word was not aggressive but it was very certain. The troll left. It went back out through the door it had come in through, which involved some structural renegotiation with the door frame, and then it was gone and the bathroom was quiet except for water dripping from the damaged sinks and Ron Weasley's breathing, which was elevated. Hermione stared at Harry. "The club didn't move," she said. "No," Harry said. "You stopped it," she said. "Without a wand." "I had my wand," Harry said. "I just didn't use it." He turned to look at her. "Are you all right?" Hermione looked at him for a moment with the expression she wore when she was recalibrating something fundamental and taking it personally that she hadn't already calculated for it. "I'm all right," she said, with remarkable composure. "How did you know where I was?" "I didn't," Harry said. "I knew where the troll was. You were just in the same place." "That's an important distinction," Hermione said. "I thought so," Harry said. Ron made a sound from the doorway that was not quite coherent but conveyed a strong overall sentiment of disbelief. "You told it to leave," he said. "And it left." "It left because continuing wasn't in its interest," Harry said. "Most things will back down if you give them a clear understanding of the situation." He paused. "That's something I'm still working on, actually. The trolls are an easier case. People are more complicated." The professors arrived then, McGonagall first, and Quirrell just behind, and Harry watched Quirrell come through the door with the particular attention he always deployed around the man. The cold layer underneath Quirrell's own magic was agitated tonight, hotter than usual, which Harry stored as information and said nothing about. McGonagall looked at the structural damage to the bathroom, at the unconscious troll being levitated by the arriving Snape, and at the 3 first-years standing in the middle of it with varying degrees of composure. "Can someone explain," she said, with enormous controlled precision, "what happened here?" Ron and Hermione both started talking at once. Harry said nothing, because what he'd done was not something he was prepared to explain fully, not to McGonagall, not tonight, and because the most useful thing he could do right now was watch Quirrell. Quirrell had positioned himself at the back of the group of professors, and he was watching Harry. Not the bathroom. Not the troll. Harry. With a specific quality of attention that was not surprise. He knew Harry had done something. Whatever was living under Quirrell's consciousness knew it. Harry met Quirrell's eyes for exactly 2 seconds and then looked away, and in those 2 seconds something passed between them that was not words but was unmistakably communication, an acknowledgement, from one party to the other, that the shapes they were showing the world were not the full picture. Quirrell looked away first. Quidditch trials were in October and Harry made the team on his first attempt, which surprised the team captain, Oliver Wood, and did not particularly surprise Harry, who had been flying with Clark since he was 7 and had somewhat different baseline parameters for what constituted fast. The fact that the school broom assigned to first years shuddered above 50 miles per hour and had the aerodynamic profile of a drain pipe was something Harry had to make a conscious accommodation for. He spent the first 15 minutes of the trial getting the measure of it, which Wood took as uncertainty and McGonagall, watching from the stands, took as caution. Then he stopped being cautious and caught the snitch in 4 minutes. Wood made a sound that was half exultation and half something else. "You've flown before," Wood said, when Harry landed. "A bit," Harry said. "That was a Wronski feint into a reverse sloth grip roll at the end," Wood said. "Where did you learn?" "I made it up," Harry said. "The broom pulls left in a dive so I compensated." He examined the broom. "Does the school have anything faster than this? This one's steering is imprecise." Wood stared at him. "You're 11, he said. "Yes," Harry said. "Is there a faster broom?" There was not a faster school broom, but there was a Nimbus 2000 that arrived by owl 2 days later, a gift from McGonagall that technically violated the first-year broom prohibition and which she had clearly decided to violate with full deliberate intent. Harry received it in the corridor before breakfast with Ron looking on with the specific expression of someone trying not to be entirely undone by envy and mostly succeeding. "That," Ron said, "is a Nimbus 2000. "I see that," Harry said. "Fastest broom made," Ron said. "Top speed 150. Harry thought about Mach 1 over Metropolis, the cold air, the city lights, Clark's back under his hands. He thought about the moment the sound barrier cracked and Harry had gone silent in a way that was not fear but pure experience. "That should be enough," Harry said, and Ron laughed, helpless and genuine, and it was the kind of laugh that cemented things. November arrived and with it Hogwarts Quidditch season, and the Slytherin match on the 14th was where Harry's reputation made its first definitive turn from symbol to fact. The game was 40 minutes old when Harry saw the snitch, a flicker of gold near the Slytherin goalposts, hovering in the kind of stillness that snitches maintained when they were watching rather than fleeing. Harry turned the Nimbus and accelerated from the east end of the pitch with the ground 200 feet below and the November sky flat and grey above, and the Slytherin seeker saw him go and followed. What the Slytherin seeker had not calculated for was that Harry was not racing him to the snitch. Harry was already done racing. He'd seen the snitch's movement pattern for the past 20 minutes the way he'd been taught to read patterns, in Clark's words, "Don't watch what a thing is doing, watch what it's about to do," and he knew which direction it would break before it broke, and he angled the Nimbus low and banked hard across the pitch toward where the snitch was going to be. It was there when he arrived. He caught it without diving, without any particular drama, reaching out his right hand at full speed and closing his fist around the cold flickering wing of it, and the crowd took a moment to understand what had happened because it had not looked like a seeker catch so much as a seeker appointment, a meeting both parties had agreed to in advance. Gryffindor won. It was not close. In the changing rooms afterward, with the team making the specific noise of people who have done something good together, Wood sat next to Harry with the look of a man revising several plans. "How?" Wood said. "I watched it," Harry said. "You watched it," Wood said. "It had a pattern," Harry said. "Snitches are semi-sentient, they respond to stimulus, which means they have predictable responses. Once you read the stimulus response pattern, the position is calculable." He looked at Wood. "Do you want me to explain it more carefully?" "We could use it tactically, yes," Wood said immediately. "Yes, I absolutely want you to explain it more carefully." Harry spent an hour in the changing room with Wood and a piece of chalk on the slate board Wood kept for game planning, and Hermione appeared at the door 20 minutes in because Ron had told her about the post-match discussion and she could not pass up a post-match discussion, and Ron appeared because Hermione had disappeared, and by the time they left they had produced a 12-point tactical framework for snitch location that Wood would later claim changed his entire understanding of the seeker position. The library at night was where Harry did his real work. Not the evenings before 11 when Madame Pants was still at her desk and students had supervised access, The real work happened in the hour between midnight and 1 in the morning, when Harry had discovered that the restricted section's wards reset on a 20-minute cycle that left a 4-minute gap if you approached from the east entrance, and that Madame Pansa's security charm relied on motion detection that could be redirected to the opposite wall with a very simple deflection he'd learned from Evelyn. He was not in the restricted section to break rules. He was there because the restricted books contained the information he needed, and the information he needed was about Voldemort. Specifically, about what Voldemort had done to survive. The theory of magical soul division was in 3 books in the restricted section, 2 of which referred to it obliquely and 1 of which, a slim black volume with no author credit, shelved behind a copy of Advanced Potion Theory Volume 4 as if someone had deliberately hidden it, discussed it directly and with scholarly precision that suggested personal familiarity. Harry read it twice. Then he sat on the floor of the restricted section with the book on his knees and the implications of what he'd read arranging themselves in his mind with the filing system quality the sorting hat had noticed, each piece finding its place with a click that was not comfortable. Soul division. Multiple fragments. Objects as containers for fractured consciousness. The cold thing in Quirrell was not Voldemort's ghost. It was a piece of him, a fragment housed in the one place a Dark Lord who could not yet take physical form could reasonably situate himself, in a living person, attached to the inside of a skull, surviving on borrowed life and proximity to magic. And whatever was in the vault below the school was almost certainly another piece. Or related to one. He pulled the mirror from his pocket. "It's 1 in the morning," Clark said, when his face appeared, with the specific tone of someone who has been waiting to say that. "I know," Harry said. "I'm in the library." "Why are you in the library at 1 in the morning?" "Because that's when the gap in the ward cycle is." Harry turned the black book over. "Clark, I found something. It's going to change the shape of what we're dealing with." He held the book up to the mirror. "Can you read the title?" Clark looked at it. His expression did the thing it did when something serious was happening, not alarm, but a settling, a deliberate gathering of attention. "Read me what it says," Clark said. Harry read him the relevant passages. Clark listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Harry most valued about Clark, the ability to receive information without editorializing until the information was complete. When Harry finished, Clark was quiet for a moment. "Horcruxes," Clark said. "That's the word, yes. And you think he made more than one?" "The book suggests the more fractured the soul, the further from death," Harry said. "Voldemort was obsessed with immortality. He wouldn't have stopped at one." He paused. "He might have made several. Which means that whatever is in the vault below this school is almost certainly one of them. And destroying Quirrell, which I think someone is going to try to do eventually, probably Quirrell himself if whatever's riding him decides to make its move, only eliminates one fragment." "The others are somewhere," Clark said. "The others are somewhere," Harry confirmed. "And if nobody else knows about this, Harry." "I'm not saying I'm going to go hunt them all this term," Harry said, with the patience of someone preempting an objection. "I'm saying I need to know. And Dumbledore needs to know that I know, because right now he's managing this situation in a way that treats me as a piece on the board, and if he understands I'm ahead of him strategically, the dynamic changes." Clark looked at him. "You want Dumbledore to know you've figured it out." "I want Dumbledore to know that I am not the 11-year-old who arrived on a train 2 months ago without context or resources," Harry said. "I want him to revise his model of me. Because whatever he's been planning, I've seen enough of how he operates to know that there's a plan, and the plan involves me, and I want him to build the plan around who I actually am." Clark was quiet again, longer this time. "When did you figure out he has a plan?" Clark said. "The second week of term," Harry said. "He looks at me the way you look at a situation you've been managing for a long time that's developing differently than expected." He paused. "He's kind. I think he genuinely cares. But kindness and instrumentalization aren't mutually exclusive, and I'd rather he didn't do both to me without knowing I'd noticed." Clark sat with this for a moment. Outside the mirror, Harry could see the metropolis skyline in Clark's window, the city lit and moving. "You're going to talk to him," Clark said. "After Christmas," Harry said. "I want to watch a bit longer first." He put the book down. "How are you?" "I've been watching you in a library at midnight and I'm reconsidering my life choices," Clark said. "I'm 11, Harry said, "not 5. The midnight thing is fine." "Go to bed," Clark said. "In a minute," Harry said. "Now," Clark said. "I want to finish the chapter," Harry said. "Harry." "Fine," Harry said, closing the book. "Tomorrow evening, normal time. I'll have more by then." "Bed," Clark said firmly, and his face disappeared from the mirror. Harry looked at the dark mirror for a moment, and then at the restricted section around him, the spines of books that held things the world had decided were too dangerous to be easily accessible. He thought about Voldemort in pieces, scattered across objects, clinging to existence with the specific desperation of someone who has made survival the only thing they care about. He thought about a cupboard in Surrey and a broken toy soldier and a 5-year-old who had practiced being invisible, and the decision that had been made about him before he was old enough to make decisions. He was not going to be a piece on anyone's board. He put the book under his arm, replaced the others he'd moved, and walked out of the restricted section through the east entrance at 1:14 in the morning, and went to bed. Chapter 4, Fire and Old Magic. Christmas at the Fortress of Solitude was Martha Kent's idea. She arrived in Metropolis on the 22nd with 2 suitcases and a box of baking supplies and the firm intention of making the fortress feel like a home for 4 days, which Clark received with the expression of a man who knew better than to point out the architectural challenges. Harry arrived from King's Cross at noon on the 23rd, stepping off the platform into the grey London cold and going through the barrier to find Clark on the other side, and the hug that followed was the kind that happens when 2 people have been communicating through a mirror for 3 months and have been aware the whole time of the difference between that and the real thing. Clark held on for a moment longer than necessary. Harry let him. "You look different," Clark said, when he stepped back. He turned Harry by the shoulder and looked at him the way he always looked at Harry when they'd been apart, a fast, comprehensive scan, habit rather than concern, though tonight it was probably some of both. "I'm an inch taller," Harry said. "I checked." "More than that," Clark said. "You look," he stopped. "Like yourself," he said, which was Clark's way of saying something he didn't have the precise words for. "Good," Harry said. "The alternative would be worrying." He picked up his trunk. "Is Martha here?" "Made cookies already," Clark said. "Complained about the fortress kitchen." He took the trunk. "She's making it work." "She always makes it work," Harry said. The fortress in December was something entirely different from the fortress in July. The Arctic dark was absolute above it, stars compressed and brilliant in the way they only were this far north, and the crystal architecture threw back the light from below in fractals that turned the air inside to something between a building and a prism. Martha had put string lights along 3 of the main chamber's lower crystal formations, ordinary earthborn string lights, battery-powered, warm amber, and the effect was astonishing, this ridiculous human warmth nestled inside Kryptonian alien geometry, and Harry stopped in the entrance and looked at it for a long moment. "She put up Christmas lights in the Fortress of Solitude," he said. "She did," Clark said. "That's the best thing I've ever seen," Harry said. Martha came around a crystal bank with flour on her hands and her reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and she took one look at Harry and pulled him into a hug that was warm and immediate and smelled like baking. "You need feeding," she said. 3 months at a school and you've got that lean look again." "I eat perfectly well," Harry said, into her shoulder. "I'll be the judge of that," she said, releasing him and looking at his face with the particular combination of warmth and precision that was uniquely Martha. "You're thinking about something difficult." "I'm always thinking about something difficult," Harry said. "This is a different kind," she said. "This is the kind you've been sitting with for a while." She patted his face once. "Food first. Then difficult." They ate dinner at a folding table Clark had brought from the apartment because the fortress's original furniture ran to Kryptonian scale and proportion and was not conducive to a family Christmas dinner, and Martha had made roast chicken and root vegetables and something with apples that she wouldn't name but that tasted like autumn made edible, and Harry ate a lot of everything and told them about the term in a way that was edited for content, the Quidditch, the Friends, the library. Research described in its broad strokes, Quirrell described with enough clinical distance that the alarm it should have generated was somewhat contained. Clark heard the containment. Said nothing during dinner. Let it breathe. After dinner, Martha went to the reading area she'd established in the most domesticated corner of the fortress, a blanket, the string lights, a stack of books she'd brought, and Clark and Harry sat on the floor of the main chamber with their backs against a crystal formation and the fortress breathing quietly around them. "Tell me the rest," Clark said. Harry told him the rest. The Horcruxes, detailed. The theory of it, the implications of multiple fragments, the specific quality of what he'd sensed in Quirrell and how it connected to what was below the school. The midnight library sessions. The Black Book. The reading he'd been doing on advanced dark magic theory that Hermione had started calling Harry's independent curriculum with the affection of someone who pretended to disapprove but had borrowed the Black Book twice. Clark listened to all of it with his arms resting on his knees and his eyes on the middle distance, not interrupting, letting it come in the order Harry gave it. When Harry finished, Clark turned his head and looked at him. "How certain are you?" Clark said. "About the Horcruxes, very certain," Harry said. "About the number, less certain. The theory suggests diminishing returns after a certain point, each division weakens the caster. I think 4 or 5 is the range. And the one in the school is connected to whatever he put there specifically," Harry said. "I think the vault was a decoy. Or a draw. I think he put it there to have access to it, to have one fragment in a location that he knew his host could access." He paused. Quirrell went to Gringotts before the school year started. "Whatever was in that vault isn't there anymore." Clark went still. "What?" Harry said. "The vault robbery," Clark said. "Gringotts, July 31st. It was in the Prophet, nothing stolen, officially. But the goblins reported a break-in." "July 31st, Harry said. "My birthday." He considered this. "While we were in Diagon Alley." "While we were in Diagon Alley," Clark confirmed. They sat with this for a moment, the coincidence of it, that they'd been in the same street while something significant was already in motion around them, the gears of a plan built before Harry arrived at Hogwarts already turning. "Whatever Quirrell was sent to get wasn't there," Harry said. "Because Dumbledore had already moved it. To the school. He moved it to the school and set up protections," Clark said. "Which means the vault robbery told Dumbledore that Voldemort was already moving. Which means Dumbledore knows the threat is active. And he's managing it," Harry said. "His way. Using the school as a controlled environment. He pulled at a thread in his sleeve. He knows about the Horcruxes, Clark. He has to. He's too intelligent not to have worked it out by now. Does he know you know?" "Not yet," Harry said. "But I'm going to tell him. After Christmas." He looked at Clark. "I want to go in there with you at my back. Not physically, I mean I want to have talked to you first, have the conversation structured, know what I'm trying to accomplish." "What are you trying to accomplish?" Clark said. "I want him to stop planning around the version of me that doesn't exist," Harry said. "The orphan who doesn't know anything, who can be guided and protected and pointed at the problem when the time comes." He paused. "Whatever the prophecy says, and I think there is one, I think there's a prophecy about me and Voldemort that Dumbledore's been working from since before I was born, whatever it says, I want to be the one who decides what it means. Not him." Clark looked at him for a long moment. "Have you thought about the possibility," Clark said carefully, "that whatever the prophecy says might be true? That there might be something real that you can't avoid?" "Yes," Harry said immediately, which told Clark he'd been thinking about it for a while. If there's something real about my connection to Voldemort, the scar, the wand, the night my parents died, then I want to understand it on my own terms. Understanding it doesn't mean being controlled by it. He met Clark's eyes. You didn't let Krypton define you. You chose what to take from it. The silence that followed was the particular kind that arrives when something true has been said in a way that was not designed to manipulate but lands with full weight anyway. Clark looked at his hands for a moment. Yeah, he said. I did. He was quiet for a bit longer. All right. When you talk to Dumbledore, what do you need from me? I need you to write to him first, Harry said. Before I go back. Frame it as a guardian check-in. Tell him you've been briefed on the security situation at the school. Let him know that you're not a passive party. He paused. I want him to know that whatever he's planning, there's someone watching who doesn't need his permission to intervene. Clark nodded slowly. That's smart. I learned from the best, Harry said. Martha called from the far corner of the fortress, without looking up from her book. You two had better be going to sleep at a reasonable hour. We're just talking, Clark called back. You're talking about the Dark Wizard, Martha said, with complete certainty. I can hear the tone. Sleep first. Dark Wizards in the morning. Clark and Harry looked at each other. She always knows, Harry said. Always, Clark confirmed. Christmas morning in the fortress produced gifts that Martha had wrapped in actual paper, which she had brought specifically because she disapproved of Clark's habit of presenting gifts without wrapping because he said it was more efficient. Harry got 3 books from Clark, one on advanced magical theory, one on the history of British magical families from the 15th century, and one on theoretical energy manipulation that Clark had sourced through contacts at a university in California and had annotated in the margins in blue pen, his notes intersecting with the text in a way that made the book into a conversation. Harry flipped through it at the table and stopped twice to read specific annotations and then looked at Clark with a very specific expression. You've been thinking about this, Harry said. I've been thinking about how your magic interacts with physical force vectors, Clark said. The chapter on kinetic absorption, read my note at the bottom of page 44. Harry turned to page 44. If the absorption principle scales with practitioner development, Clark had written, and assuming Harry's current rate of development holds, the theoretical ceiling on kinetic absorption by age 17 is functionally comparable to Class 4 impact resistance. Cross-reference Kryptonian solar matrix theory, the energy she pulls is structurally similar to what the fortress reads in H's magical signature. Harry read this twice. You think I could? I think there's something interesting about the way your magic handles incoming energy, Clark said. Not just projecting, absorbing and redirecting. You've been doing it instinctively. The troll. Harry thought about the Trolls Club, the way the stop had happened with the quality of something natural rather than effortful. I wasn't thinking about stopping it, he said. It was going to hit her and that wasn't going to happen. That's instinctive absorption, Clark said. The magic responded to a threat to someone you care about with a specific energy configuration. He leaned forward. I want to practice it deliberately. Over the summer. See what the ceiling actually is. You want to hit me with things, Harry said. With your consent and appropriate safety protocols, Clark said. You want to hit me with things, Harry said, with a growing smile. This is the best Christmas present you've ever given me. Martha, opening her own gift on the other side of the table, a hand-carved wooden bowl Harry had made with a combination of magic and a woodworking class he'd taken in Metropolis at age 9, looked over. Clark, she said. It's for research, Clark said. You're going to throw things at my grandson, Martha said. Controlled structural impacts in a supervised environment, Clark said. My grandson, Martha said, to no one in particular, who is 11 years old. I'll be 12 by then, Harry said. And I want to know what I can do. Martha looked at him for a moment with the warm precision she'd deployed since the first day she'd met him, the look that saw through the practical argument to the thing underneath it, the 11-year-old who had grown up watching someone save the world and wanted to understand his own capacity for the same. "Fine," she said. "But we're setting parameters." "In writing." "In writing," Harry agreed, and the smile was full and warm and completely his own. The letter Clark wrote to Dumbledore was 6 paragraphs. Harry read it twice, made 2 suggestions, and Clark incorporated both. The letter said, in its careful and precise way, that Clark was aware of the security situation at Hogwarts, that he had been following the investigative thread with interest, that he expected Harry to be kept informed of any developments that were directly relevant to his safety, and that Clark would appreciate a meeting in the new year to discuss the year's arrangements going forward. The last paragraph said, simply, "I trust that the protections in place are sufficient for the current situation. I would ask that if there is any doubt about their sufficiency, I be the first person you contact." It was not a threat. It was a fact about the order of events in a possible future, delivered with the specific clarity of someone who meant exactly what they said. Dumbledore's reply arrived on the 27th. It was warm, considered, and notably careful in the places where it answered questions obliquely rather than directly. Clark read it at the kitchen table in Metropolis. They'd come back on the 26th, with Harry reading over his shoulder. "He's good," Harry said. "He's very good," Clark agreed. "He's answered every question without giving me anything I didn't already have." "But he knows you know," Harry said. "That's the point. He's responding to informed scrutiny, not concerned parenting. The register is different." He straightened. "When I talk to him, he'll have already recalibrated." "Don't underestimate him," Clark said. "I won't," Harry said. "But don't underestimate me." Clark handed him the letter. "I never have," he said. The Mirror of Erist was in an unused classroom on the 3rd floor and Neville found it by accident in the 2nd week of January, backing into the room while trying to avoid Peeves, and came to Harry at breakfast the next morning with the expression of someone who had seen something they didn't have the framework for. "There's a mirror," Neville said. "And when you look in it you see, it's not a reflection. It's something else." Harry looked at him carefully. "What did you see?" Neville's ears went pink. "Me," he said. "But different. Better. Like the version of me that," he stopped. "What is it?" Harry had read about the Mirror of Erist in the 2nd week of term and had deliberately not sought it out, because he'd understood from the description what it did and had decided he didn't need what it offered. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But Neville's face, the honest vulnerability of it, the thing the mirror had shown him that he'd clearly been carrying for a long time, made Harry go still in a specific way. "It shows you what you want most," Harry said. "Your deepest desire." "Oh," Neville said. He turned his spoon over in his fingers. "That makes sense." A pause. "What do you think you'd see?" "I don't know," Harry said, which wasn't entirely true. He went that night, because not going felt like cowardice, and Harry had decided a long time ago that cowardice was not a luxury available to him, not because of any prophecy or destiny but because the alternative was a smaller life, and he didn't want a smaller life. The mirror was at the end of the empty classroom, covered in a sheet that had been somewhat disrupted by Neville's exit. Harry pulled the sheet off and stood in front of it. He looked. The reflection wasn't immediate, it built itself, assembling from light, and what it gave him was a room. A living room, warm and full, books everywhere, Clark's apartment but larger somehow, the way a place can be larger in imagination than in fact. And in it were people. His parents, his real parents, James and Lily Potter, Lily's red hair and his father's glasses, both alive and present and looking at him. Martha on the couch with her reading glasses. Evelyn in the chair by the window. Neville and Ron and Hermione on the floor. And Clark, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and the particular expression he wore when Harry had done something he was proud of but wasn't going to announce directly, the expression that showed up in the quiet after something good and said everything through the lines around the eyes. Everyone he'd chosen and everyone who'd chosen him, together and unbroken. Harry looked at it for a long time. It was a beautiful thing, what the mirror showed. He recognized the specific beauty of it, not the fantasy of power or wealth but the fantasy of wholeness, of all the pieces together at once. He understood why Neville had stood here and why people came back, because the mirror showed you the exact shape of what you were missing and made you feel the edges of it. He looked at his parents' faces. He looked at Lily Potter's eyes, which were his own. Then he put the sheet back on the mirror and left. He used the mirror, the actual mirror in his pocket, not the enchanted glass in the classroom, to call Clark on the walk back to Gryffindor Tower. "I found the mirror of Erist," he said. Clark was quiet for a moment. "What did you see?" he asked. Harry told him. All of it, including his parents, including Clark's face in the doorway. The silence on Clark's end was warm and unhurried. "How do you feel?" Clark said. "Like it was a true thing," Harry said. "About what I want. And also like, it's not where I need to be. What I need to be doing isn't standing in a room looking at what I want. It's building toward it." He paused. "Does that make sense?" "That makes complete sense," Clark said. "I want my parents back," Harry said, and the simplicity of it, said out loud without qualification, sat between them in the quiet. "I can't have that. But the rest of it," he turned a corner in the corridor, the torchlight moving. "The rest of it I can work toward." "Yeah," Clark said. "You can." A pause. "Harry, I'm going to say something and I want you to actually hear it rather than file it and move on." "Okay," Harry said. "The mirror showed you me," Clark said. "As part of what you want most. I want you to know, that's not a wish. That exists. Right now." Harry stopped walking. The corridor was empty and the torchlight was steady and the castle breathed around him. "I know," Harry said, after a moment. His voice was very level. "I know that." "Good," Clark said. "Go to bed. You always say that." "You're always awake too late," Clark said. "Good night, Clark," Harry said. "Good night, Harry," Clark said. Harry put the mirror in his pocket and walked back to Gryffindor Tower, and his steps were even and unhurried, and he was not performing being all right, he simply was, in the particular way of someone who has looked at the shape of their loss, acknowledged it fully, and chosen to keep moving forward anyway. He met with Dumbledore on a Thursday in late January, at the old man's request following Clark's letter, in the circular office at the top of the moving staircase. The office was extraordinary, instruments Harry couldn't name making small sounds and movements on every surface, portraits of previous headmasters dozing in their frames, a large bird on a perch that was clearly a phoenix and turned its golden head to look at Harry when he entered with the intelligent attention of something that knew what it was looking at. "Harry," Dumbledore said, from behind the desk. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." "Thank you for the invitation," Harry said, and sat. Dumbledore folded his hands on the desk and looked at Harry with those careful blue eyes, and Harry looked back with the specific quality of attention that Clark had once described as making people feel seen without telling them what you see. "Your guardian wrote to me," Dumbledore said. "I know," Harry said. "I read the letter." A small pause. "I appreciate his attention to your welfare," Dumbledore said. "He is clearly a remarkable man." "He is," Harry said. "I'm lucky he found me." Dumbledore looked at him with something that might have been gentle. "I had hoped," he said carefully, "to be more involved in your early years. The circumstances that led to your placement with your aunt, put me in a cupboard for 5 years, Harry said. Not angry. Factual. Dumbledore's expression acknowledged this without fully absorbing its weight. The magical protection, he said, that your mother's sacrifice created, required proximity to blood family, Harry said. Not a specific living arrangement. I've read Lily Potter's work on sacrificial magic. She was thorough. He held Dumbledore's gaze. The cupboard was not a necessary condition. It was a choice made by my aunt and uncle that you were aware of. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. The phoenix on the perch made a low sound. "You have been busy," Dumbledore said, mildly. "I've had a good library," Harry said. "Professor, I'd like to talk about what's below the school." "A beat." "That," Dumbledore said, "is a serious subject for a first year." "I'm a serious first year," Harry said. "The Philosopher's Stone is below us. Voldemort sent Quirrell to retrieve it because immortality is a particular interest of his, given that his current method of survival involves soul division." He watched Dumbledore's face. "You know about the Horcruxes." The name landed in the office and did not dissipate. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment. The instruments on the shelves made their small sounds. A portrait behind Dumbledore's head cracked open one eye and looked at Harry with surprised attention. "You are," Dumbledore said, eventually, "considerably more prepared than I had anticipated." "I know," Harry said. "May I ask how?" "The restricted section," Harry said. "The ward cycle has a gap at 1:14 in the morning if you come from the east entrance. You should probably fix that." He paused. "There's a black book shelved behind Advanced Potion Theory Volume 4. Someone hid it carefully. Do you know who?" Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that was genuinely difficult to read, something between admiration and recalibration and something else, something Harry caught at its edge and couldn't fully name. Concern, possibly. Not for Harry's safety. For something more abstract. "I am beginning to understand," Dumbledore said, "why your guardian was specific about the terms of our discussion." "He's thorough," Harry said. "I learned it from him." He leaned forward. "Professor, here's what I want to say. I know there's a prophecy. I don't know what it says. I'd like to, eventually, when you decide I should, but I know it exists and I know it shapes how you see me." He kept his voice even. "I want you to know that I'm not the piece you've been planning for. I'm a person who happens to be involved in this situation, and I'm going to engage with it on my terms." "That's not defiance, it's just accurate." Dumbledore was silent for a long moment. "And your terms include," he said. "Full information," Harry said. "When I ask you something directly, you answer directly. You don't redirect me toward the answer when you think I'm ready for it, you treat me as someone capable of handling information and let me decide what to do with it." He paused. "In return, I'll tell you what I know and what I find out. We work as partners, not as architect and instrument." The word instrument landed with some weight. Dumbledore was quiet for the longest time yet. The phoenix shifted on its perch. A portrait muttered something that the others ignored. "I have," Dumbledore said, eventually, "made assumptions about you that were based on circumstances that no longer apply." He looked at Harry with an honesty that sat differently from his earlier careful warmth. This was something more stripped down. "I am an old man who has been wrong before, Harry, and I am aware that my methods are not universally kind." A pause. "I would like to try your way." "Good," Harry said. "I cannot promise to be perfect at it," Dumbledore said. "I'm not asking for perfect," Harry said. "Just honest." Dumbledore looked at him for a moment with something that might have been the beginning of genuine respect, not the abstract respect he'd always had for what Harry represented, but the specific kind that comes from encountering a person clearly. "The stone," Dumbledore said, "is protected by a series of challenges." "Quirrell," he stopped. "You believe Voldemort intends to use Quirrell to retrieve it?" "Before the year ends," Harry said. "The fragment in Quirrell is growing stronger. Whatever Voldemort has done to sustain himself in that state, it has limits. He'll need the stone or a body before he reaches them." He paused. "I've been watching Quirrell's patterns. He's running out of time." "You've been watching Quirrell's patterns," Dumbledore said. 6 weeks, Harry said. "He goes dark on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The pattern is tightening, the intervals are shorter now. 2 weeks ago it was every 5 days. Now it's every 3. Dumbledore looked at him with an expression of very full attention. Harry, he said. When the time comes, and I believe you are right that it is coming soon, I would ask that you do not go below alone. I'll have backup, Harry said. Backup, Dumbledore said, as though testing the word. Harry touched the mirror in his pocket, a reflex, unconscious. Always, he said. Quirrell moved on a Tuesday in June, which Harry had predicted to within 48 hours. He moved on a Tuesday in June while Dumbledore was in London, which was not a coincidence. Quirrell had engineered it, Harry had watched him engineer it, the careful strategic move of something that had been waiting for exactly this window. Harry found out Dumbledore had left at dinner and was down the third-floor corridor by the time Ron and Hermione had processed what was happening. Harry, Hermione said, keeping up through pure determination. If Dumbledore is all ready, Dumbledore is coming back, Harry said. I sent a message through the mirror when I saw Quirrell leave dinner early. Clark's already notified him. He stopped at the locked door at the end of the corridor, the one with the three-headed dog behind it that had been the building's worst-kept secret since October. But Quirrell went through 20 minutes ago. I'm not waiting for Dumbledore. There's a three-headed dog, Ron said. There's a sleeping three-headed dog, Harry said. Quirrell used a sleeping charm. The effect has a duration. We need to move. Ron looked at the door. At Harry. At the door. Right, he said, with the specific brand of Weasley resolution that appeared when Ron had decided that being scared was not going to be the deciding factor. Right. Okay. Yeah. Hermione already had her wand out. Harry opened the door. The dog, Fluffy, which Harry had always found the most Hogwarts name possible for a three-headed monster the size of a small house, was asleep in the enormous chamber, all three heads down, its rumbling breath moving a harp that had been knocked to one side, still playing. The trapdoor in the floor was open. They went through. The devil's snare took about 4 seconds because Hermione hit it with Lumos Solum before any of them had time to panic, which Harry noted was the most efficient thing he'd seen done in the entire building all year. The flying keys were more interesting, the enchanted room was full of them, hundreds of them on wings, swooping and darting, and the broom nearest the door was old and handled badly, but Harry was on it before Ron had identified the door and across the room before Hermione had located the right key by description. He didn't chase it. He watched it for 6 seconds, identified its circuit pattern, positioned the broom at the point of its next pass, and took it out of the air with one hand without the broom changing speed. Ron caught the door key on the second throw. The chess set was the moment that redefined Ron Weasley. The room was the entire floor, black and white squares, pieces the size of people, and what was needed was clear from the setup. Ron looked at it for 30 seconds with an expression that was not calculation so much as something deeper, something instinctive and total, and then he started directing. Harry had seen Ron play chess 14 times since September. He had understood within the first 2 games that Ron was a strategist of genuine quality in this specific domain, not the filing system approach Harry applied to problems, not Hermione's methodical analysis, but something more intuitive than either, a sense for the shape of a game before it was fully played. Ron placed them, moved them, and directed the board with a quiet authority that sat differently on him than his usual self, not louder, not performing, just clean and sure. Harry played his piece where Ron told him to and did not second-guess it once. The endgame required the queen, and the queen required a sacrifice, and Ron said, someone has to take the king's bishop, with his jaw set and the chessboard logic already completed in his eyes. He moved his castle. The White Queen went for him. Harry was moving before the queen finished its arc. He came off his square in 3 steps and put himself in the path not physically but magically, the same reflex that had stopped the Trolls Club, the warm sure extension of something that had become reliable if not fully understood, and the queen's strike deflected sideways with a noise like stone hitting stone and Ron went down but not as hard as he should have, shaken but not broken. Harry, Ron said, from the floor, I had it. I know, Harry said. But I'm faster. He checked Ron's head. Can you move? Obviously, Ron said, sitting up. Stay with Hermione, Harry said. He picked up his piece and moved it to Ron's original square. The board is open. 2 more moves. He made them. The troll was already unconscious. Quirrell's work, Harry noted, and the fact that Quirrell had time to deal with the troll and was still only 20 minutes ahead registered as information about the stone's final challenge. The potions room had a logic puzzle in a ring of fire, a line of bottles, and a poem on a wall. Hermione read the poem twice, identified the correct bottles in 4 minutes, and handed Harry the small bottle that allowed forward passage through black fire. "I'm coming with you," Hermione said. "The other bottle goes back," Harry said. "Get Ron out. The chess room isn't safe." Hermione's jaw tightened. She looked at him with the expression she wore when she disagreed but had processed the logic. "Be careful," she said. "I'm going to be fine," Harry said. "That," she said, "is not the same as careful." He went through the black fire. The final chamber was a mirror in it. Not just a mirror, the mirror of Eriste, moved from the 3rd-floor classroom, centered in a stone room with Quirrell between Harry and it, and behind Quirrell's eyes, surface close in a way that Harry had never felt from him before, something cold and purposeful. Quirrell turned. The stutter was gone. "You," Quirrell said, and the voice had doubled layers to it, the fundamental frequency wrong in the same way the magic had always been wrong, 2 presences speaking from one throat. "I was told you might come." "I figured," Harry said. He looked at the mirror. "You can't get the stone from it." Quirrell looked at him with something that was not quite a smile. "The headmaster's protections," he said. "He hid the stone in a mirror that only shows it to someone who wants it but doesn't intend to use it." A pause, and the cold layer beneath his voice grew colder. "I cannot take the stone." "But you can." "No," Harry said. "You want to protect it," Quirrell said. "You want to keep it from me. If you look in the mirror with that intention, you'll find it in your pocket." The cold presence surfaced further. Harry could see it now, visible at the edges of Quirrell's eyes, something watching through borrowed windows. "And then you'll give it to me." "I won't," Harry said. "You will," said the second voice, deeper and more distinct, peeling away from Quirrell's. "Or I'll take something from you instead." "Let me speak to him," Quirrell said, "or, not Quirrell, the other one. Remove the turban." Quirrell's hands went to the purple turban and unwound it with the mechanical compliance of someone who has long since given up having opinions about what their body does. What was underneath was a second face on the back of Quirrell's head, and it was not a face Harry had seen before, but he recognized it the way you recognize a name you've only read in print: the pale skin, the red eyes, the absence of a nose, the compressed intelligence in features that had been systematically made to be other than they were. Voldemort looked at Harry. 11 years, Voldemort said, and the voice was thin and certain, stripped of everything unnecessary, the voice of someone who had decided a long time ago that directness was more efficient than performance. "And already you've done more than I expected." A pause. "Your mother was clever too." Harry looked at him without stepping back. "She stopped you," Harry said. "A 22-year-old woman with no special advantage except that she loved me, and she stopped you. You spent 10 years as a fraction of a soul because of a choice she made." He tilted his head. "That must have been humbling." The red eyes flickered. "Your guardian cannot help you here," Voldemort said. "I know," Harry said. "I don't need him here." He moved toward the mirror. Quirrell stepped toward him, raised a hand, and the magic that came out of it was the cold kind, the kind that had Voldemort's intention behind it rather than Quirrell's, and Harry felt it coming with the ambient perception he'd been developing all year and shifted his weight and redirected. The spell hit the stone wall at an angle. Quirrell looked at him with fresh assessment. Voldemort's expression changed in the subtle way of something recalibrating. "Interesting," Voldemort said. Harry reached the mirror and looked into it. He looked at his own reflection looking back at him, and then the image shifted, his reflected self, reaching into a pocket, pulling out a small red stone that glittered like a concentrated sunset, and he felt it in his palm before he understood what had happened, solid and warm, already there. He closed his fist around it. "Give it to me," Voldemort said. "No," Harry said. Quirrell lunged. What happened next was not slow or cinematic. It was fast and practical and very simple in its physics. Quirrell's hands on Harry's arm, and then Quirrell's immediate withdrawal, and then Quirrell's pain, loud and total, because Harry's magical field and whatever Lily Potter's sacrifice had left in Harry's skin were apparently incompatible with Voldemort's presence in ways that Harry had only partially understood from theory and understood completely now. Quirrell's hands were burning where they'd touched him. Not metaphorically. Not magically. Burning, the skin going white and then dark, and Quirrell made a sound that had no syllables in it, and Voldemort's voice rose, not calm now, urgent and sharp. "Touch him, get the stone." Harry hit Quirrell's face with his open palm. He used the same reflex that stopped the Trolls Club and deflected the Queen's blow and redirected Quirrell's first spell, the warm, broad, reflexive extension of his magic in the direction of a threat, and Quirrell went down, and the magic met Voldemort's fragment with the specific quality of Lily Potter's sacrifice and something else, something Harry didn't fully have words for yet, and Voldemort's face on the back of Quirrell's head began to come apart. The cold presence screamed. It was not a sound that belonged in a physical space. It moved through the room at a frequency that was not quite auditory, something between sound and cold, and Harry stood in the center of it and did not flinch, stood with his fist around the stone and his feet planted and his jaw set and everything Clark had built into him over 6 years deployed in a single act of not moving. The presence tore free of Quirrell and crossed the room like dark weather, hitting Harry as it passed, and the contact was ice and wrongness and something like recognition, two things from the same origin point, touching briefly, pulling apart, and then it was gone. Quirrell collapsed. Harry stood in the room alone. He opened his fist and looked at the stone. It was smaller than he'd imagined from the descriptions. Warm in his palm. He put it in his pocket, and the pocket felt heavier than its weight should have suggested, and he turned around and looked at the empty room and the extinguished fire and Quirrell's still body. He sat down on the floor. He was aware, in the immediate aftermath, of his hands shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline cost of sustained magical exertion, the body doing what it did when it had been running on something fast and intense and was now asked to stand down. He let his hands shake. Clark had told him a long time ago that the shaking was information, not weakness. It meant the body had done something real and was recalibrating. He pulled the mirror from his pocket. Clark's face appeared instantly, no lag, which meant Clark had been watching the reflection end of the mirror, waiting. "I'm all right," Harry said. The expression on Clark's face moved through several things quickly before settling into something that was not quite composure but was working toward it. "Where are you?" "The final chamber," Harry said. "Below the school. Quirrell is down. Voldemort is gone, the fragment, anyway. He went through me and took damage. I don't know how much." He paused. "I have the stone." "The stone," Clark said. "In my pocket," Harry said. "For now." He looked at the ceiling. "Clark, the connection to Voldemort, when the fragment touched me. There's something there. Something in me that's like him." He paused, choosing words with care. "Not a part of him. But something he left. In 1981. Clark was quiet. "I think," Harry said, "that I might be a Horcrux." The silence that followed was the kind that needed to be fully inhabited before anyone moved inside it. "We'll figure it out," Clark said. "I know," Harry said. "I know we will." He looked at the stone in his hand. "I just wanted to tell you. Before anyone else." "Always," Clark said. Harry closed his fist around the stone again and stood up, and his hands had stopped shaking, and above him the castle breathed its 1,000 years of breath, old magic in every stone, and somewhere above that the sky was still going, vast and ordinary and indifferent to the things that happened in dungeons, and Harry straightened his spine and walked toward the stairs. Behind him, the room was dark and quiet. Ahead of him, everything was still to be decided. Chapter 5, The weight of prophecy. Dumbledore's office smelled like old paper and something sweet that Harry couldn't identify, and the phoenix, Fox, was singing quietly on his perch when Harry arrived the morning after the dungeons, which was the kind of morning that has a very specific quality to it, the quality of things being different than they were the day before in ways that haven't fully registered yet. Harry had slept 9 hours and eaten a large breakfast and felt, physically, fine. The shaking had stopped before he reached the hospital wing the previous night. Madame Pomfrey had looked him over with the focused attention of someone expecting damage and found very little, some magical exertion fatigue, a bruise on his forearm from the chess room, the slight thermal signature she'd noted twice before that she'd eventually recorded in his file as ambient magical elevation, likely constitutional. He'd lain in the hospital wing bed with Ron on one side, still sore from the chess room, and Hermione on the other with a book she wasn't reading, and they'd talked for 3 hours in the quiet way of people who have been through something together and are sitting in its aftermath. Ron had wanted the complete account of the final chamber and Harry had given it without editing, and Hermione had asked 3 follow-up questions, each more incisive than the last, and Ron had said, "You touched his face," with an expression of such pure incredulity that Harry had laughed for the first time since the dungeons. "You just hit him," Ron said. "Voldemort. The fragment of him in Quirrell," Harry said. "You hit Voldemort in the face," Ron said. "Essentially," Harry said. Ron processed this for a moment. "That's brilliant," he said, with complete sincerity. "That's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard." Hermione made a sound that was not agreement but was not disagreement either, which for Hermione was a kind of agreement. "What you said about possibly being about the fragment connecting to you," she said carefully. "Have you told anyone?" "Clark," Harry said. "Last night. And we're going to figure it out," Harry said. Hermione looked at him with the expression that meant she was running 17 different analytical threads simultaneously and finding none of them fully satisfying. "That's not specific," she said. "No," Harry agreed. "Not yet." She'd accepted this with visible effort, and this morning Harry was in Dumbledore's office because Dumbledore had asked to see him and because Harry had agreed, and because the conversation they'd had in January had produced something closer to honesty than Harry had expected and he wanted to see whether it had held. Dumbledore looked tired. Not in the visible physical way, his robes were impeccable, his beard immaculate, the half-moon glasses in their precise position. But something in his eyes had the quality of a man who had spent the night sitting with something uncomfortable and had arrived at morning without having resolved it. "Harry," he said. "Please sit down." Harry sat. "First," Dumbledore said, "I want to say that what you did last night was extraordinarily courageous. And that I am glad you are unharmed." "Thank you," Harry said. "I also want to say," Dumbledore said, with the careful honesty they'd negotiated in January, "that you should not have had to go down there at all. That the situation that necessitated it was one I could have managed more proactively, and I did not." Harry looked at him. "Why didn't you?" A pause. "I believed the protections were sufficient," Dumbledore said. "And I believed," he stopped. "I believed that if Voldemort made his move while you were present in the school, your role in the outcome might be instructive. In terms of preparing you for what is to come." Harry sat with this for a moment. "You wanted to see what I'd do," he said. "That is a less generous framing than I would choose," Dumbledore said. "But it is not inaccurate." "I found the stone," Harry said. "I stopped Voldemort's fragment. Those are the outcomes. I understand the logic." He paused. "I also understand that the logic involved putting me in danger you could have reduced. I want you to know that I noticed that, and that going forward I prefer to be briefed rather than tested." Dumbledore looked at him for a moment with something that was genuine. "That is a fair position," he said. "I will try to honor it." "Good," Harry said. "Now. The stone." He put it on Dumbledore's desk. Dumbledore looked at it. Something moved across his face, the weight of it, the history of it, what it meant for the man who had made it. "Nicholas Flamel," Harry said. "He's going to destroy it." Yes, Dumbledore said quietly. That means Quirinus Quirrell's death is partly a consequence of Voldemort's decision to use the stone as an anchor, Harry said. But Quirrell was a person. I don't know how much of a choice he had in any of it. Very little, I think, Dumbledore said. Right. Harry looked at the stone. Professor, I need to talk about the Horcruxes. They talked for 2 hours. It was the most honest 2 hours Harry had spent in a room with Dumbledore, which was partly because Harry already knew enough that evasion would have been obvious and partly because Dumbledore, to his credit, appeared to have decided that January's negotiation was still in effect and that the previous night had accelerated its terms considerably. Dumbledore knew about the Horcruxes. Had known, he admitted, since before the First War. Had suspected the number was somewhere between 4 and 7, the Riddle Diary, the locket, the cup, the ring, the diadem. Possibly the snake. Possibly, and here he stopped and looked at Harry with the specific care of someone delivering information they would prefer not to be delivering, possibly one more. Me, Harry said. Dumbledore was quiet. The scar, Harry said. The night in Godric's Hollow. The killing curse should have worked. It came back and destroyed his body and left a fragment in the nearest living thing with sufficient magical capacity to contain it. He kept his voice very level. Me. It is, Dumbledore said, with great care, a possibility I have been considering. Have you moved past considering? Harry said. I have, Dumbledore said. I believe it to be very likely. Harry nodded once. He had known since the dungeons, had named it through the mirror to Clark in the immediate aftermath, had spent 9 hours with the knowledge sleeping beside him and had woken up with it still there, solid and incorporated. He had decided, somewhere between the dungeons and this office, that the knowledge would not define him the way someone else might let it define him, but that it also deserved to be looked at directly rather than set aside as a problem for later. Is there a way to remove it without killing me? Harry asked. I am researching that question, Dumbledore said. With urgency, Harry said. It was not a question. With urgency, Dumbledore confirmed, and something in his voice was different this time, not the managed warmth of the architect but the simpler register of someone who was, genuinely, worried about a person. I'm going to research it too, Harry said. Clark has contacts at magical institutions in other countries. We'll approach it from multiple directions. That is, Dumbledore said, a very sensible approach. Harry stood. Then stopped. The prophecy, he said. Dumbledore looked at him. I'd like to know what it says, Harry said. Not now. This summer. When you've had time to think about how to have that conversation and I've had time to, he paused. To be ready. How will you know when you're ready? Dumbledore said, genuinely curious. Harry thought about it. I'll ask you for it, he said. That'll be how you know. He left, and the phoenix sang a single clear note behind him as the door closed. The train home was warm and full and entirely different from the train 9 months ago in every way that mattered. Harry sat in the same kind of compartment but it was occupied now, Ron with his feet on the seat and 3 sandwiches, Hermione with a book open but unread, Neville with Trevor and a Mimbulus Mimbletonia that Professor Sprout had gifted him at term's end and that occupied roughly a third of the available luggage space and emitted a sound like very quiet breathing. They talked for most of the journey home. Not about the dungeons, about everything else, the year accumulated, the things that had happened in it and beside it, Ron's impressive ongoing list of Quidditch grievances, Hermione's summer reading plan which she presented as casual and was clearly a structured curriculum, Neville's greenhouse ambitions which had expanded during the year from tentative to architectural. Harry listened to all of it and contributed to most of it and felt, with the particular warmth of something true rather than performed, that these 3 people, these specific 3 people with their specific irreplaceable qualities, were a thing he'd built in 9 months that had the density of something much older. Next year, Ron said, with the authority of someone announcing policy, we have to be in the same charms class. Hermione's the only reason I passed the practical. You passed because you practiced, Hermione said. I just made you. That's what I said, Ron said. That's not, Hermione looked at Harry. Is that what he said? More or less, Harry said. Neville was looking out the window. My gran is going to ask me about everything, he said. She reads the Prophet. She knows, about last night. The Prophet had run a story that morning, brief, incomplete, working from sources that were clearly secondhand, but the shape of it was accurate enough. You know who returns to Hogwarts, boy who lived defeats him again. The headline was exactly as graceless as it sounded. What are you going to tell her? Harry asked. The truth, Neville said, with the quiet certainty he deployed when he decided something. She worries when she thinks I'm not being careful. If she knows what actually happened, she worries less than if she's imagining it. Harry looked at him. That's smart, he said. Neville looked surprised, as he still did sometimes when Harry said something directly positive about him, as though the accounting hadn't quite caught up with the reality. It's just, he shrugged. She raised me. I know how she thinks. That's still smart, Harry said. Knowing how the people who matter to you think. Ron was looking between them with his habitual expression of someone following a conversation that was operating at a register he found slightly abstract but was trying to keep up with. My mum is going to cry, he said. Fair warning. She'll have read the Prophet and yeah. He paused. She might also try to feed you until you can't move. That's how she manages worry. I don't object to that, Harry said. We're doing the Burrow for 2 weeks in August, Ron said, with the particular ease of someone confirming an arrangement already made, and then caught himself. I mean, if that's, I asked my mum and she said yes and she'd already written to your, Clark said yes, Harry said. 2 weeks ago. I was going to mention it. Ron looked at him. You knew. I wanted to see how long it took you to bring it up, Harry said. Ron threw a sandwich at him. King's Cross was the usual chaos of steam and families, and Harry stepped through the barrier into the non-magical side and Clark was there. Not in the cape. Jeans and a grey shirt, hands in his pockets, standing a few feet back from the crowd the way he always stood, not to be unobtrusive, which was largely impossible given his dimensions, but to give Harry room to arrive on his own terms. Harry crossed the station in 14 steps and Clark put a hand on his shoulder and looked at him with the comprehensive scanning look, checking everything at once, and then pulled him into a hug that was brief and complete and said everything it needed to without words. You look good, Clark said. I'm fine, Harry said. Really? I know, Clark said. You look good anyway. Behind Harry, Ron was being absorbed into an immediate wall of ginger that turned out to be Mrs. Weasley, who had apparently come to King's Cross despite it being quite out of her way because she had read the Prophet and needed to see for herself. Harry watched Ron disappear into the hug and smiled. Hermione's parents were waiting further along the platform, a neat couple who looked at Hermione with the particular combination of pride and slight bewilderment that Harry had learned was common to Muggle parents of magical children, the slight sense of watching someone you love speak a language you're still learning. Hermione saw Harry watching and gave him a wave that was efficient and warm in equal measure. Neville's grandmother was a small fierce woman in a green hat with a stuffed vulture on it that Harry had noticed in September and still could not fully interpret. She took Neville by the shoulders when he appeared, looked at him carefully as if checking for damage, and then pulled him in with a fierceness that was entirely at odds with her composed expression. Clark had Harry's trunk before Harry could reach for it. They walked through King's Cross together, through the crowds and out into the London afternoon, and Clark bought 2 coffees from a stand by the exit, one for himself, one for Harry, who had started drinking coffee in April because Hermione had started drinking coffee in April and it turned out it was actually good. They sat on a bench outside the station. Tell me everything, Clark said. Harry told him everything. The complete version, not the condensed mirror call account, the meeting with Dumbledore, the full 2 hours, the Horcrux theory confirmed, the stone destroyed, Quirrell dead, Voldemort's fragment gone into whatever dark space it retreated to when its host was lost. The Horcrux he might be. The prophecy he hadn't heard yet. Clark listened with both hands around his coffee, not interrupting. When Harry finished, Clark was quiet for a full minute, which was a lot of quiet from Clark, who processed fast. The Horcrux in you, Clark said. It's a theory, Harry said. A good one. Is it causing you any symptoms? Clark said. Not that I can identify, Harry said. But I've been what I am my whole life, so I don't have a baseline without it. He paused. It might be part of how my magic developed the way it did. Having a fragment of someone who spent decades refining dark magic, it might have been like having a very strange supplementary influence on the development of my own ability. Clark looked at him. You think it's been shaping you? I think it's been there, Harry said. I don't think it's been directing me. There's a difference. He held Clark's gaze. I'm me, Clark. Whatever's in there didn't make me. I know that, Clark said. Completely certain. Then we just have to figure out how to remove it without, Harry made a gesture that encompassed the obvious problem. Without dying, Clark said flatly. Right. Clark looked at the street for a moment. At London moving past them, taxis and pedestrians and pigeons with the unshakable London confidence of birds that know they own the pavement. I've been talking to Diana, he said. Harry looked at him. About this? I didn't know the specifics until last night. But I've been talking to her about magical theory since September, when she started asking about you. Clark glanced over. She's interested. She's encountered soul magic in several traditions. She thinks there are approaches that the British magical world hasn't fully explored. What kind of approaches? Old ones, Clark said. Pre-Hogwarts. Pre-most things. The kind that don't get into textbooks because they predate the institutions that print textbooks. He paused. She wants to meet you. Harry processed this. Wonder Woman wants to meet me, he said. She prefers Diana, Clark said. She finds the other thing a bit much. Diana wants to meet me, Harry said. She does, Clark said. In her words, the child is interesting and I have been patient about it for long enough. Harry considered this. She's been patient about meeting me? Since October, Clark said. She read the Prophet piece and sent me a note. Harry laughed, sudden and genuine. All right, he said. I'd like to meet her too. They sat on the bench in the London afternoon a little longer, coffee going cold, the city moving around them. A pigeon investigated the area near Harry's feet with the focused entrepreneurial energy of a metropolis pigeon that had somehow ended up in London and was adapting. Clark, Harry said. Yeah. The summer. I want to work on the absorption thing. What you wrote in the book. We said we'd set parameters, Clark said. In writing, Harry confirmed. With Martha's input. She'll add a safety clause, Clark said. She always adds a safety clause, Harry said. That's what makes the safety clauses good. He stood up, picking up the coffee. I also want to research the Horcruxes. All of them. Not just mine, all of them. If Voldemort comes back, when, Clark said. Not fatalistic. Just accurate. When he comes back, Harry said, I want to be ahead of him. Not reacting, ahead. He looked at Clark. He's going to go for a body first. That takes time. We have time. How much time? Clark said. I don't know, Harry said honestly. But I know he'll move methodically. He's not impulsive. He planned the Quirrell approach for over a year. Whatever he does next will take at least that long to prepare. He paused. We use the time. Clark stood up. He was quiet for a moment, looking at Harry in the afternoon light, at the boy who was 11 years old and had spent the previous night defeating a fragment of a Dark Lord in an underground chamber and was now sitting on a King's Cross bench strategizing about the next stage with the focused calm of someone who had been preparing for exactly this. Yeah, Clark said. We used the time. They took the train to Heathrow and flew back to Metropolis from altitude, Harry on Clark's back the way he'd ridden since he was 7, the Atlantic dark below them and the stars bright above, and Harry watched the ocean pass and thought about all the things that were still to be decided and found that the thinking did not frighten him, it energized him, the way problems did when you felt like you had the tools to approach them. 3 days after Harry arrived home, Dumbledore sent a letter. Not the careful, diplomatic kind he'd sent in January. This one was shorter and more direct, which Harry read as either a consequence of the previous night's events recalibrating Dumbledore's communication style or as something new. It was something new. The letter said that Dumbledore had received communication from a member of the Ministry of Magic regarding Harry's guardianship. That certain individuals, unnamed, but Dumbledore's language suggested the Ministry rather than private parties, had raised the question of whether Harry's placement with Clark Kent was legally sound under British magical law. That there was a possibility, not immediate but real, of formal proceedings. Harry read it twice and handed it to Clark without comment. Clark read it once. His face did the settling thing. "They want to move me back," Harry said. "Or make me a ward of the Ministry." "They want leverage," Clark said. "Over what you represent. Over the narrative." He put the letter on the table. "The prophet story made you visible again in a specific way. You're not the lost orphan anymore, you're the boy who defeated Voldemort twice before the age of 12 and you're living with Superman and you're not under anyone's control." He paused. "Someone finds that threatening." "The Ministry," Harry said. "Or someone in it." "Or someone using the Ministry," Clark said. Dumbledore's language is careful about the distinction. He looked at the letter again. "He's warning us. Not asking our opinion. Warning us." "Which means he thinks it's serious," Harry said. "It's manageable," Clark said. "I have Diana's legal contacts in international law. I have the solicitor here. The jurisdictional question got resolved properly 2 years ago and the paperwork exists." He paused. "But the magical world has its own legal system running parallel to the British civil system and the overlap is complicated. They could try to make Hogwarts my legal guardian," Harry said. "Or the school itself. Dormitory requirement. It's in the founding charter if you read it carefully, the school can claim protective custody in cases of at-risk students." Clark looked at him. "When did you read the founding charter?" "November," Harry said. "After I found the ward gap in the library." Clark closed his eyes briefly. "I'm saying," Harry said, "that I want to know every legal avenue they have before they try to use it. Then we know what we're dealing with." "Then let's find out," Clark said. He picked up his phone. "I'm calling Diana and the solicitor at the same time. You write back to Dumbledore, ask him specifically who at the Ministry and through what mechanism." They worked for 4 hours. Diana's response to the magical legal question was, characteristically, both thorough and unambiguous. She had encountered the overlapping jurisdiction problem in 3 previous cases involving magical practitioners in non-magical custody and had opinions about all of them, most of which were unfavorable to the institutional parties. She sent 12 pages of notes through Clark's fax machine at 11 in the evening and wrote at the top in neat, emphatic handwriting, "Tell Harry I look forward to meeting him. Also, they will not succeed." Dumbledore's answer to Harry's follow-up came the next morning by owl, fox, which Harry took as significant, because you didn't use a phoenix as a post owl for routine correspondence. The letter named the Ministry official, Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic himself, operating not on legal grounds but on political ones. The British magical world was unsettled by the previous night's events. Voldemort's return, even in fragmentary form, was something the minister had been publicly denying for the better part of a decade. Harry's public account of what had happened in the dungeon contradicted the official narrative. A compliant Harry, a Harry under ministry oversight, would be considerably easier to manage than a Harry living in Metropolis with Superman. Harry read this and felt something clarify. Not anger, something more focused than anger, more useful. The specific clarity that arrives when you understand the shape of something completely, when all the variables are visible. Fudge is scared, Harry said, to Clark. Yes, Clark said. He's not going to stop being scared, Harry said. That's important. Scared people keep acting from the fear. They don't think clearly and they escalate when pushed. He paused. I don't want to push him. I want to make the legal ground so solid that pushing doesn't help him. That's exactly what we're doing, Clark said. What else do we have? Harry said. What's the strongest thing we have besides the paperwork? Clark looked at him. Public narrative, he said. The Prophet ran a story about last night. The narrative is already moving. Boy who lived defeats Voldemort again. If Fudge moves against you legally, well, that's the public story. He looks like he's moving against a hero. That's bad politics. So we make the narrative louder, Harry said. That's not exactly subtle, Clark said. It doesn't need to be subtle, Harry said. It needs to be true. He paused. Lois. Clark looked at him. Lois is the best journalist you know, Harry said. She writes for the Daily Planet, which is a real newspaper that real people read and that has credibility the Prophet doesn't. If she writes about what happened last night, the real version, with sources, it goes into the non-magical record. Fudge can manage the magical press. He can't manage the Daily Planet. Clark was very still for a moment. You want to go on record, he said. I want the true version of last night to be on record, Harry said. Everything we're allowed to disclose. Voldemort's return. The stone. What I found in the dungeons. He paused. I've been the boy who lived in the magical world since I was 1 year old. I'd rather be Harry Potter in both worlds. Clark looked at him for a long time. You're 12 years old, Clark said. I'm 12 years old who spent last night defeating Voldemort, Harry said. The age is accurate, but it's not the most relevant information. Clark laughed, short and involuntary. I'm going to call Lois, he said. Lois Lane showed up at the apartment the following morning with a voice recorder, a legal pad, and the particular focused energy that meant she had already been thinking about the story since Clark called and was ready to begin immediately. She sat across from Harry at the kitchen table with her recorder running and her pen ready and looked at him with the direct, non-pitying attention that Harry had liked about her from their first meeting. From the beginning, she said. What actually happened last night? Harry told her. All of it, the parts Clark had cleared with Diana's legal review, which was most of it, Quirrell, the stone, the chamber, Voldemort's fragment. He was specific where specificity mattered and general where it didn't, and Lois asked good questions, the kind that opened things rather than closing them, and in 2 hours they had the basis for something that was genuinely true. The Horcrux detail, Lois said. The soul division. That's in the story. That's in the story, Harry said. It's publicly relevant. It's what makes him difficult to permanently defeat. People deserve to know what they're dealing with. The Ministry is going to hate this, Lois said, not asking. The Ministry has been telling the public Voldemort is gone for 10 years, Harry said. The public deserves better than comfortable misinformation. Lois looked at him with the expression she wore when she was revising an assessment. You're 12, she said. People keep pointing that out, Harry said. It keeps being relevant, she said. You know what you're doing. Going on record means you become the face of this. Not just in the magical world. In both worlds. I know, Harry said. You're okay with that. I'd rather be the face of the true version, Harry said, than the subject of someone else's comfortable one. Lois was quiet for a moment. She put her pen down and looked at him in the way she'd looked at the balcony apple tree the first time she saw it, like something was more than she'd anticipated and she was genuinely interested in the more. Can I ask you something off the record, she said. Yes, Harry said. Are you scared, she said. Not the mission, not the strategy, you, personally. Are you scared? Harry considered the question with full honesty. Of Voldemort specifically? Not right now. He's a fragment without a body and we have time before he's a real problem again. He paused. Of the Horcrux thing, the possibility that part of the solution to him involves something I can't control. Yes. That scares me. He paused again. But being scared of it doesn't change what needs to happen. So I think about the fear clearly, and then I put it in the right category, and then I work on the problem. Lois looked at him for a moment. Clark taught you that, she said. He did, Harry said. Though he doesn't think about his own fear that cleanly. He's better at teaching it than doing it. From the kitchen, Clark called, I can hear you. I know, Harry said. Lois smiled, a real one, warm and unguarded. All right, she said. Let's get back to the record. The piece ran in the Daily Planet 4 days later. It was on the front page, above the fold, under Lois's byline, Boy Who Lived, Twice, Superman's Ward Confronts Dark Wizard's Return. It was thorough and specific and sourced, and it hit the British magical world like a stone hitting still water, the rings spreading fast and wide, through the Prophet, through private correspondence, through every pub and sitting room where magical people read the paper and talked about what it meant. Fudge's office issued a statement the same day calling the report speculative and irresponsible, which was the specific language of a man who had not managed to prevent the story and was trying to minimize it. It didn't minimize. The guardianship proceedings, Clark's solicitor informed them 2 weeks later, had been quietly dropped. Dobby appeared on a Wednesday in July. He appeared in the living room, which he had apparently accessed through some mechanism that bypassed Clark's security completely, which Clark filed as important information about the limits of Kryptonian-derived security systems against house elf apparition. Harry came in from the balcony to find an 18-inch creature with enormous tennis ball eyes sitting on his couch. Harry Potter, Dobby said, in a voice of great urgency. Dobby has come to warn Harry Potter. Harry sat down in the chair across from the couch. Hello, he said. What are you warning me about? Dobby looked at him with eyes that were processing several things at once, the expectation that Harry would be alarmed, the actual calm with which Harry was receiving him, and something else, some recalibration of expectation. Harry Potter must not return to Hogwarts, Dobby said. There is a plot. Terrible things are being planned. Harry Potter is in danger. I'm always in some kind of danger, Harry said, pleasantly. Can you be more specific? Dobby's large eyes went wider. Dobby cannot say, he said, with genuine distress. Dobby has said too much already. Okay, Harry said. Let me ask some questions and you can just react. Don't say anything. Just react. He leaned forward. Is this connected to Voldemort? Dobby flinched. I'll take that as yes, Harry said. Is it connected to a specific object? Something that could be used to act in the school? Dobby's hands twisted together with the anxious energy of someone desperately trying not to react and reacting anyway. Also yes, Harry said. Is it connected to a person? Someone with access to the school? Dobby's distress reached a new intensity that was itself a clear answer. A family, Harry said. Not just a person. A family with a house elf who's very worried about Harry Potter. He held Dobby's gaze. Which family do you serve, Dobby? The house elf made a sound of profound distress, stood up, and began banging his head against the coffee table, which was a response that Harry had not anticipated and which he stopped by reaching over and putting his hand between Dobby's head and the table surface. Don't do that, Harry said. I can find out another way. You don't have to tell me. Dobby stopped. Looked at Harry with those enormous eyes. Harry Potter is kind, he said, in a somewhat unsteady voice. Harry Potter should not go back. There will be a weapon. In the school. And it will open what must not be opened. What must not be opened, Harry said. Dobby's mouth closed very firmly. Harry thought about this for a moment. He thought about what he'd read in the restricted section in November, about the things Dumbledore hadn't been able to tell him yet, about the history of Salazar Slytherin and the founding of Hogwarts and the thing that had been legend in the school for 1,000 years. "The Chamber of Secrets," Harry said. Dobby made a sound that was not words and then disappeared. Harry sat in the quiet living room for a moment. Then he picked up the mirror. "The Chamber of Secrets is real," he told Clark, when his face appeared. "And someone is going to open it." Clark's expression did the settling thing. "Tell me everything." "Dobby just visited," Harry said. "House elf. Wouldn't give his family's name, but the pattern suggests someone with both dark connections and access to school systems. Someone who has an object, a weapon, he called it, that could open the chamber." "What's the Chamber of Secrets?" Clark said. "Slytherin built it," Harry said. "According to the legend, he wanted Hogwarts to be pure blood only. When the other founders disagreed, he's supposed to have built a hidden chamber containing something, a monster, that would purge the school of Muggleborns when the true heir of Slytherin opened it." He paused. "Most people think it's a legend. I've been unsure since October when I read the original sources. But now you think it's real," Clark said. "Dobby thinks it's real," Harry said. "And Dobby is scared in a way that suggests personal knowledge rather than second-hand concern." "A weapon," Clark said. "An object that opens it." "An artifact," Harry said. "Something with Slytherin's intent in it. Something old." He paused. Clark, Riddle, Tom Riddle, he was Slytherin's heir in the line of succession. And he was obsessed with Hogwarts specifically. He came back to interview for the defense position twice, both times refused by Dumbledore, both times during periods that coincided with. He stopped. "What?" Clark said. "The chamber was opened before," Harry said slowly. 50 years ago. A girl died. A student was expelled, a student who kept a mechanical spider and was blamed for the attack, but spiders don't kill people in ways consistent with the description. He'd found this in the library in March, filed it, hadn't known what to do with it yet. Tom Riddle was at Hogwarts 50 years ago. He was in the school when it opened. Clark was quiet. "He opened it himself," Harry said. "And blamed someone else. And then he made a Horcrux from the act." "The weapon," Clark said. "The object." "He made a Horcrux from opening the chamber. Which means the Horcrux contains the method to open it again." "Or it is the method," Harry said. "A piece of his consciousness from the time when he had the ability, the knowledge, the connection to Slytherin's power." He paused. "A diary." Clark said nothing. "Riddle's diary," Harry said. "It exists. Somewhere. And Dobby's family has it, or had access to it, or knows where it is." He looked at the mirror. Dobby was terrified. "Not of me, of what his family would do if they knew he'd warned me. His family is going to use this. During the school year," Clark said. "During the school year," Harry said. "When there are students in the building. When it can do maximum damage." He paused. "Clark, I need to go back to Hogwarts." "I know," Clark said. "And I need Dumbledore to know before I get there." "I'll call him," Clark said. "Tonight." "Tonight," Harry agreed. He put the mirror down and looked at the room, the books everywhere, the balcony garden going green and wild beyond the glass door, the apartment that was home in every way that word could mean. Clark's voice came through the mirror, which was still open. "Harry." "Yeah. I'm coming to Diagon Alley with you this year," Clark said. "You came last year," Harry said. "I'm coming this year too," Clark said. "Every year. I'm going to keep showing up in Diagon Alley every year until they stop looking at you like a symbol and start looking at you like a person with an informed and involved older brother." Harry picked the mirror back up. Clark's face in it was completely certain. "That's going to take a while," Harry said. "Good," Clark said. "I'm patient." Diana met Harry on a Thursday in late July on the roof of the Daily Planet building, which was where Clark tended to have conversations he wanted to have without walls around them, and she arrived the way she apparently arrived everywhere, stepping out of the air at the roof access door as though she'd simply been adjacent to elsewhere and had chosen to be here now. She was taller than Harry had expected. Not Clark tall but tall, and she had the specific presence of someone who had lived through more history than history books fully accounted for, the kind of depth that sat differently from mere confidence. She looked at Harry for a moment with eyes that were very clear and very old. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. But Clark said 11. "I'm 12 now," Harry said. "Still small," she said, without apology. She sat down on the roof parapet with the comfortable ease of someone for whom heights are a trivial variable. "Tell me about your magic." "Everything. From the beginning," Harry told her. She listened the way Clark listened, completely, without interruption, with the full weight of her attention. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The absorption reflex," she said. "Show me." Harry looked at her. "You want me to demonstrate?" "I want to see it with my own eyes," she said. "Not described. Demonstrated." Harry looked around the roof. He found a loose fragment of gravel from the maintenance area by the door, picked it up, and held it out. "Throw something at me," he said. Diana picked up a piece of gravel of her own and threw it with a precise, unhurried motion. The gravel hit Harry's raised hand and stopped, and the impact rolled through the magic in a way Harry could feel clearly now that he was paying deliberate attention, the energy coming in, being received, redirected downward into the roof surface. A small crack appeared in the roofing material where the energy discharged. Diana looked at the crack. Then at Harry. "Again," she said. "But don't discharge it into the ground." "What do I discharge it into?" Harry said. "Absorb it completely," she said. "Hold it." Harry looked at her. "I don't know if I can do that." "Try," she said. He tried. The second piece of gravel, thrown harder, hit his palm and the energy arrived and he held it, redirecting it inward instead of out, and there was a moment of compression, of something dense and warm accumulating, and his hand felt warm and full, and he held it. Diana looked at his hand with an expression of very focused attention. "Now release it," she said. "Outward. Small and controlled." Harry released it. The air in front of his hand rippled. A small, sharp wave of displaced energy, no larger than a dinner plate, traveling forward about 3 feet before it dissipated. Diana looked at this for a moment. Then she looked at Harry. "You have never done that deliberately before," she said. "No," Harry said. "Clark has been thinking about your power in linear terms," she said. "Input and output. Projection and absorption as separate operations." She paused. "What you just did is a cycle. Receive, hold, release. If you develop that cycle deliberately, with training, the ceiling is not what Clark calculated." "What is the ceiling?" Harry asked. "I don't know," she said. "That's interesting." She looked at him with a kind of frank engagement that he found immediately comfortable, the absence of anything managing or strategic in it. "The soul fragment," she said. "Your possible Horcrux. I have been in contact with a scholar on Themyscira who has studied soul magic for 300 years. She has thoughts. Good thoughts?" Harry said. "Specific thoughts," Diana said. "Which is better than good?" She paused. "There is a precedent, not exact, not identical, but structurally similar, for the removal of an involuntary soul fragment from a living host without damage to either the host or the fragment's connection to its source magic." Harry went very still. "Without damage to my magic." "The magical development that has occurred under the fragment's influence may be partly due to the fragment's presence," Diana said. "A pure removal might reduce that development. The approach my scholar describes is different. It isolates the fragment within your magical structure rather than removing it." containing it instead of eliminating it, until such time as the primary source is destroyed and the fragment naturally dissolves. That assumes the primary source is eventually destroyed, Harry said. Yes, Diana said. And assumes I survive long enough for that to happen, Harry said. Yes, Diana said again, without softening it. Harry looked at the city below the roof, at the evening metropolis traffic, the lights coming up. I appreciate you not making that more comfortable than it is, he said. Comfortable would be wasted on you, she said. Clark says you think clearly under pressure. I am treating you accordingly. He says too many nice things about me, Harry said. He says accurate things about you, Diana said. There is a difference. She stood. I will send you the scholar's work. Read it, and then we will talk about how to implement the containment structure. She paused. And Harry. He looked up. The weapon your house elf described, she said. The diary. It will be in the school before you return. Someone will have already moved it. She looked at him with the old, clear eyes. Be ready before you arrive, not when you get there. I know, Harry said. Good, she said, and stepped off the parapet and was gone, back into the elsewhere she moved through as though the world's physics were primarily a suggestion. Harry looked at the empty space she'd occupied and then down at the city and then at the mirror in his pocket. He pulled it out. Clark's face. How did it go? She called me small, Harry said. You are small, Clark said. She also said the ceiling on my absorption cycle is unknown, Harry said. Which she seemed to consider more interesting than alarming. That's a Diana reaction, Clark said. She finds unknown ceilings exciting. I found it exciting too, Harry said. The discharge, he held up his hand, remembering the ripple in the air. Clark, I've never done anything like that before. Controlled output from absorbed energy. It was completely different from direct projection. Different how? Like, he searched for the right comparison. Direct projection is like pushing. This was like throwing something back. He paused. Much more efficient. Clark was quiet for a moment. We're doing the testing in August, he said. With parameters, Harry said. In writing. With Martha's safety clause, Clark said. Obviously, Harry said, and sat on the roof parapet in the warm July evening and looked at his hand and thought about ceilings that nobody knew, and found that the thought sat in him like something good, not comfortable, not safe, but alive and full of potential, which was better than both.